Chapter 494. Indeed, as imperial concubine Su said, Li Hongyuan had planned to plot against the Su family from the beginning. No matter how Li Hongming and Su Mingzhang cleaned up the mess, there was still evidence left behind. The so-called plot did not mean that Li Hongming killed someone, so there was no need to think about it. Not only that, he even revealed the truth of Su Mingzhang killing someone out of anger because of a dispute with a brothel girl. Although Qi Yuan did not explicitly state that officials were not allowed to visit prostitutes, but once it was exposed, it would be a stain that could not be erased. In the evaluation, it would even be considered as one of the virtues. Because of this, there would be even less of a need to talk about feelings and face. Fortunately, all the evidence ended here. There was no evidence that Su Mingzhang had killed several people in order to cover up the truth, and it was never mentioned. Prince Rui tried his best to persuade Lu Qingdi, but Lu Qingdi did not even banish him, let alone pay with his life. Naturally, some people were satisfied with such a verdict, but some people were very dissatisfied. On the second day after the verdict was issued, the mother of the deceased killed herself in front of the palace gate and left a blood letter. In the bloody letter, she described the Su family's immoral cruelty. She described how tragic it was when her son's body was found. She described how her family had been searching for the murderer like headless flies for months because of the grief of losing her son. She accused the Tian family of being unfair and protecting the murderer. It could be said that she cried tears of blood with every word. At the end of the bloody letter, she left the words, "Return my son," which made people's hearts ache. This time, it could be said that a hornet's nest was poked. Especially in the various academies, it seemed that because of someone's instigation, it caused all kinds of anger. Because Su Mingzhang also graduated from the imperial examination and became famous at a young age, he was once regarded as a role model by countless scholars and was quite respected. Now, the amount of respect they had was 10 times more than before. Because Su Mingzhang had climbed up the ranks too quickly these years, he was already the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue in his 30s, which attracted the jealousy of many people. Now, they were adding insult to injury and fanning the flames. They said that Su Mingzhang did not deserve to be a scholar and asked the emperor to punish him severely. They once caused a ruckus at the palace gate. If it were not for someone inside controlling the situation, they might have already broken into the palace. Then, this fire burned imperial concubine Su and Prince Rui. Su sure was a noble consort, yet she did not restrain or advise her family. Instead, she indulged them in all kinds of ways. She was not worthy of sitting in this position. At the same time, they shouted that they didn't believe that noble consort Su and Prince Rui didn't know about this matter. They must have helped conceal it and helped the tyrant. The Su family was even more miserable. From top to bottom, they did not dare to go out. If they went out, they would be baptized by stones and rotten vegetables. Of course, the people who did this were not the students, but the ordinary people. These people seemed to have been brainwashed, thinking that the Su family was evil beyond redemption. Imperial concubine Su and Prince Rui weren't the only ones in a terrible fix. Lu Qingdi was also having a terrible headache. This wasn't the first time he had used his connections to get away with it, but it had never been this serious before. What was wrong with him this time? Alright, everyone knew that the deceased wasn't convinced and was too unyielding. Thus, this storm was set off. As scholars, they were the future pillars of the Qi Yuan. With so many people, Lu Qingdi definitely couldn't give the order to severely punish them. Thus, he could only punish the main culprit to vent the anger of the people. Su Mingzhang was sentenced to exile. Not only that, the other officials in the Su family were more or less affected. Especially Su Mingzhang's father, who was demoted by 3 ranks. The reason was that he did not teach his son well. Speaking of which, Su Mingzhang's official position was more than 3 ranks higher than his father's. In this situation, whether it was the imperial court or the Su family, they should all follow Su Mingzhang's lead. To say that Su Mingzhang's father did not teach his son well was somewhat untenable. However, Lu Qingdi was also implicated, so he naturally took his anger out on him. After changing the verdict, Emperor Lu Qing issued an edict to all the academies. As a place to educate people, they should properly guide the students. How could they gather people to make trouble? They must be strict with the students. If there was a next time, they would be severely punished. Among them, the Imperial College was the most severe. Who let the Imperial College be the National Academy? The Imperial College's chancellor was directly removed. This Imperial College's chancellor was Zhou Yingshuang's father-in-law. The whole family was gloomy. At one point, they wanted Zhou Yingshuang to go to Jin Qinhuang Fu to find Jingwan for help. When Zhou Yingshuang gave birth to a child, because of the difficult birth and heavy bleeding, her body was seriously damaged. She was in confinement for a full 100 days. Although she was out now, she was still recuperating. In Zhou Yingshuang's view, this was a matter for the emperor to decide. She shouldn't have involved her best friend. Moreover, although Jin Qinhuang was a Wangye, he didn't have any power. If he meddled in this matter, wouldn't it be asking for trouble? Moreover, her father-in-law was only removed from the position of Imperial College's chancellor. His rank didn't change, but he was moved to a less noble position. She was going to recuperate and take care of her son who wasn't in a good condition. Before, Jingwan had already told her that she must be mentally prepared for her son's possible situation. In fact, Jingwan didn't want to say it, but for Zhou Yingshuang's sake, she still sent someone to say it. As a married woman, she always needed to settle down. If this child really wasn't good, she must have a plan and prepare early. Later, when others saw and pointed at her, she wouldn't feel so bad. Moreover, if she wanted to give birth to another child, she must recuperate well. If the child wasn't good and she didn't know the reason, she would frown and feel depressed. How could she recuperate well? In fact, it could be seen now that the child really wasn't good. Of course, it wasn't as bad as expected. However, it wasn't only for Zhou Yingshuang herself. If she wanted this child to have a better future, it was necessary for him to have a biological brother. This was decided by the surrounding background and no one could do anything about it. Zhou Yingshuang wasn't a heartless person. No matter how bad her son was, he was still a piece of meat that fell from her body. She would do her best to raise him. Therefore, right now, she just needed to recuperate. Taking care of the child was the most important thing. Everything else had to stand aside. Although her mother-in-law and the others were angry, they didn't dare to do anything. At most, they just gave a cold face. At this time, the situation took a turn for the better. All the students jointly wrote a letter, sincerely remorseful, hoping that the emperor would be lenient. Lu Qingdi wasn't unreasonable. In the end, Zhou Yingshuang's father-in-law was reinstated. In the end, those who should be punished were punished, and those who shouldn't be implicated weren't implicated. What's wrong? Isn't that good friend of yours fine? Or are you not happy? Li Hongyuan hugged Jingwan and pinched her face. Someone died. An innocent person. Li Hongyuan knew that Jingwan was referring to the deceased's mother. I didn't expect this either. If we had trampled on Su Mingzhang from the beginning, instead of making a turn and having an additional plan to let him turn things around, perhaps this wouldn't have, because something unexpected happened. What happened later was logical. She's innocent, but some things can't be settled like this. You have to know that if Su Mingzhang turned things around, there might be more innocent people. Moreover, according to your logic, Su Mingzhang is also innocent. After all, he was schemed against. In the scheme, I only played a role in adding fuel to the fire. I'm also one of the main culprits. How are you going to settle it? There are so many people in the world. Perhaps every day, or even every moment, there are innocent people who might get into trouble or die. Can you do anything about it? In our position, sacrifice is necessary. Whether it's intentional or unintentional, if we don't do it, then we, and the people close to us will be sacrificed by others. Are you going to give up yourself and the people related to you for others? That's no longer a person. It's a Buddha who saves all living things from suffering, Jingwan murmured. So, my pity is actually very laughable. Forget it. I know you're stupid. I know you're influenced by the memories of your previous life and cherish human life. I won't make fun of you. As long as you don't make trouble for no reason, I'll be thankful. At most, when you do things, try to avoid it as much as possible to comfort your bodhisattva heart. Tell me, I'm a living king of hell who kills people like scything flax. Why did I marry a wife like you? I guess the heavens don't like me and specially sent you to subdue me. Isn't that so? It crossed time and space. Jingwan was amused by him, and her negative emotions dissipated a little. However, Jingwan also knew that every time something like this happened, her emotions would be affected. After every time, she was very clear that since she wanted to do something, this kind of thing was inevitable. The next time, it would still be out of control. If it continued like this for a long time, it definitely wouldn't work. It might even be used by others. At that time, if she was completely affected by her emotions, then unpredictable things might happen. For example, someone used this to destroy their relationship. Once they were separated, there might be a loophole that could be exploited and used to threaten him. According to how much he valued her, the consequences were unimaginable. Jingwan's heart trembled. For this man, she had to abandon this point. She wouldn't take the initiative to harm him, but she could also calm down and control herself when it happened. Yuan, the Ministry of Justice should have all kinds of files, especially cases where people died. Can you bring some back for me to see? Li Hongyuan immediately understood Jingwan's intention. Are you sure? I'm sure. Jingwan nodded very decisively. Okay. Although he felt that it didn't matter if Jingwan was soft-hearted, it didn't matter if she changed. Moreover, her original heart wouldn't change no matter how many files she read. For example, she could be spoiled to the point of being delicate, but she would never be spoiled. Therefore, Li Hongyuan didn't stop her. Moreover, it was good that his wife had less pity. Otherwise, he would need to comfort her every time she encountered something. He would also feel tired. Well, he could only think about this in his heart. If his wife knew, she would definitely be angry again. Alas, pampering his wife was also a skill. Once Jingwan made up her mind to do something, she wouldn't give up easily. All the local homicide cases would be gathered at the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Justice would make the final judgment. Therefore, the number of homicide case files accumulated over the years in the Ministry of Justice was definitely beyond imagination. Jin Qinwang inexplicably came to the Ministry of Justice to ask for the homicide case files, causing everyone in the Ministry of Justice to tremble in fear. What kind of trouble was this? Speaking of which, it was just some files, and it was just ordinary homicide case files. It wasn't some sealed confidential file. To be honest, as long as there was a little connection, they could basically take a look at these files. It was just that the average person wouldn't be as open and aboveboard as Li Hongyuan. And for people who weren't ordinary like him, no one would be interested in flipping through these files. If the King of Hell wanted it, would they dare to not give it? Definitely not. The Minister of Justice hurriedly gave the order. As a result, piles and piles of files were carried out. Li Hongyuan's face was a bit dark. Did these people know how to do things? What did they want to do by bringing out so many files? He expressionlessly glanced at them and turned to leave. The crowd was a bit confused. What was going on? How did they provoke this living ancestor? Muan smiled as he stepped forward and casually hugged a portion. These files are just for a look. There's no other meaning. I'll take a portion today. After I'm done, I'll come back for more. Don't worry, no matter how much I took, I'll definitely return it intact. With that said, the people in the Ministry of Justice had a bit of confidence in their hearts. However, the Minister of Justice was still not at ease. If something happened, he wouldn't be able to handle it. It was better to quickly report to the higher-ups. If it was Luqingdi, he would also find it strange. But there were too many things to do, how could he care about that? If he wants it, just give it to him. It's not a big deal. With Luqingdi's words, the Minister of Justice was relieved. No matter what happened, it wouldn't have anything to do with him. It's just that these people, probably no one would think that these things were only used by Jean Qin Wang Fei to train her courage. Therefore, things that could have been very simple, because of unknown reasons and because it involved the living king of hell, would always be endlessly imagined by people. Luqingdi also wanted to know, but he couldn't even send a person to ask. There was no other way. The people at his side were all from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Firstly, there were many things that they hadn't learnt, so he didn't like using them. Secondly, with the previous lesson, he basically didn't trust these people and wasn't allowed to serve them closely. It was also because of this that, as the head steward, he originally only needed to brush his presence in front of the emperor and ask for a trick at the appropriate time. But now, there were many things that he needed to do, so he had to step out and hit the back of the head with his heel. In order to raise provisions, the Ministry of Revenue hated that they couldn't split each person in half. The low-ranking officials couldn't even go home at night, and the left assistant minister had a problem. The things that should have been done by him all fell on the Minister of Revenue and the right assistant minister's heads. These two people also didn't need to think about going home. And the position of the left assistant minister of Revenue was also very important. It was also a lucrative position that countless people coveted. Even at this juncture, there were many people fighting openly and secretly for this position, especially Prince Rui, who had suffered heavy losses. He was even more determined to get this position. But how could the others let it go so easily? Especially the princes who had been conferred the title of prince. They had long been unwilling to rely on those in front of them. The power in their hands couldn't support their growing ambitions. Now that there was a chance, they were like hungry wolves. And Luqingdi also didn't know what he wanted to do. He let the court officials recommend him, but for a long time, he didn't decide on a candidate. Is the emperor preparing to set the bait? When the Minister of Personnel passed by the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet, he stopped for a moment and said lightly. The Grand Secretary of the Cabinet stroked his beard, probably. The Minister of Personnel nodded and cupped his hands. This official will take his leave first. Luo Darren, take care. Ruan Ruizhong returned the greeting. These two top officials of the imperial court had already reached a tacit understanding after a short discussion. However, since Prince Jean didn't express anything on this matter, then they weren't prepared to get involved. Even if they were to recommend someone, it would be on the basis of appropriateness and not out of goodwill. Regardless of whether the emperor wanted to trap his son or fish for his son, they would just calmly watch the show. Although the war at the border went as expected, Fu Yunting won the first battle and wasn't so lucky later on. However, the Xiongnu's invasion of the Qi Yuan wasn't so smooth. It could even be said that they had stopped advancing. Both sides seemed to be fighting a war of attrition. In Luqingdi's words, there was already some dissatisfaction towards Fu Yunting. However, it seemed that he was still a bit resentful towards Fu Yunting and couldn't be compared to his father's generation. But, just this alone was enough to let Juan Ruizhong and Luo Peishan see that he really wanted to kill Fu Yunting. If their guess was correct, then this matter really made people feel incomparably bitterly disappointed. In this way, they could only wait for Lu Qingdi to make his move. Other than this, there was no better way. In the tense game, before Su Mingzhang was sent out of the capital, Su Guifei summoned her son, Li Hongming, and dismissed everyone. No one knew what Su Guifei said to her son. The Su family was very miserably harmed by Su Mingzhang, but the whole family didn't care and sent him off, putting on a sincere show. In the end, he was Su Guifei's nephew. The people escorting him didn't dare to treat him harshly. In addition, with Prince Rui's help, the journey was relatively good. However, before one handover, the bailiff suddenly had diarrhea and left for a while. After that, the handover was very smooth. However, one of the bailiffs felt that something wasn't right. However, he couldn't tell what was wrong. "What are you thinking about? Hurry up and leave. When the job is done, let's go drink. We still have to rush back tomorrow," the other one called out. That bailiff thus threw this matter to the side and didn't think about it anymore. Of course, this was all for later. Let's not talk about it for now. The people in the capital were so busy that they didn't have any free time. They were so idle that they were about to go moldy. However, they could only go step by step. May passed and June arrived. Because of the war and important festivals, Lu Qingdi didn't participate. Naturally, there was no hope of going to the Summer Palace. However, only a few people could go to the Summer Palace. Most people were still used to the capital's extreme heat. Li Hongyuan never wronged his own people, let alone his wife. He directly moved to the country estate. This time, he didn't even ask for Lu Qingdi's permission. Since they couldn't go to the Summer Palace, many people naturally did this. Because the other princes' families only went there, they didn't need to ask for Lu Qingdi's permission. Li Hongyuan's two country estates were adjacent to each other. The one they lived in basically didn't receive outsiders, including the family members of their brothers. There weren't many people who could confidently go to the country estate without worrying about being disliked. Most people knew their place and didn't ask for trouble, so as not to lose face. However, the other country estate was open. Although it wasn't the day for horse racing, the leisure area was quite pleasant. It was really a good place to have fun during the Summer Palace. Previously, the focus was on the horse track. Now, some people even wanted to live there and not leave. Because of the previous things that happened one after another, people had some fear of the country estate. At this time, they didn't care so much. In this way, not only did the people from the nearby villages come over all day long, many men, women, old, and young in the capital also came over when they had free time. No matter what age they were, they seemed to be able to find a way to entertain themselves. It took less than half a month for it to go from being cold and cheerless in the beginning to being a boiling cauldron of voices. Even Jingwan was a little surprised by such a grand occasion. And the flourishing popularity naturally brought about rolling in money. It was not an exaggeration to say that it made a lot of money every day. The daily income might not be as much as the horse race, but in a month's time, the net income was definitely several times more than the 3 horse races. So much money that Jingwan's liver trembled a little when she saw it. Li Hongyuan was a little surprised at first, but after that, he was completely calm and even a little indifferent. This situation will only happen in these 2 or 3 months. After that, it will naturally die down. How much money can it make? And this is the only one of its kind. Once there are people who copy it in private, it will naturally be cold and cheerless. Jingwan smiled. Although the original purpose was for people to have fun, I didn't think of making much money. Money is actually not the most important thing. Of course, money is not the most important thing. After all, with the money in Wan's hands, even if you squander it for 10 lifetimes, can you squander it all? Jingwan lightly gave him a supercilious look. Squander it. Before the marriage, you collected those precious stones, pearls, and jade. You don't even need to dismantle the old ones to make new ones. I won't be able to use them all in several lifetimes. Things like rouge and face powder are all taken from Rouge Pavilion. What's left is the materials for cutting clothes. Don't you have workshops for weaving all kinds of materials in various places? How much can I use? In the end, it seems that I spend a little more money on food, but you also have a lot of estates in various places. Let me ask Jin Qin Wang, like this, how can I squander it? Jin Qin Wang propped up his chin and slightly considered, I can't let my wife squander it. Isn't this husband not doing enough? In the end, did he not do enough, or did he do too much? This was not a self-deprecation, but a blatant show-off. If this was spread out, he would be beaten to death. Then Wan, how about we spend money to buy it from outside in the future? I've had enough of you. Spending money to buy it from outside, not to mention spending a lot of money, the things were absolutely not that good. After all, the things that Jin Qin Wang made, many of them could not be bought even if one had money. Just to achieve the achievement of squandering, to do it like this, how brainless was it? Well, it seems that it's destined that I can't let Wan squander it. My wife has become the most thrifty Wang Fei in history. The corner of Jingwan's mouth twitched, and once again, she did not want to talk to him. No matter how thrifty she was, it was impossible to reach the so-called most. According to the history that she understood, the Wang Ye that declined due to various reasons, in the end, their Wang Fei had to secretly sew and patch things up to subsidize the family, hating that they could not break a copper coin in half. The stinginess that was forced out by life was not inferior to the most stingy of women. And the current Jin Qin Wang Fu, to be honest, even if her expenses were not particularly large, compared to other Wang Fu, it was absolutely extravagant. Therefore, she really could not be as shameless as a certain someone. Yuan, the plan to target the Western Han Nu and Northern Han Nu, has it already begun to be implemented? Jingwan softly asked. Indeed. If the plan succeeds, will the current situation in the northwest change? Fu Yunting will always have a few victories. Otherwise, wouldn't he be even worse than in his previous life? After all, he was given support early on, and the starting point is completely different. However, the commander of the Western Han Nu and Northern Han Nu alliance is the Western Han Nu's virtuous king. This person's prestige in the Western Han Nu is very high. Moreover, when he was young, he lived and studied in Qi Yuan, former Wei, southern Qi, and even Cangjin and many other countries. It can be said that he has a deep understanding of these countries. If he had long been ambitious, then at that time, he would have already analyzed the armies of each country to a certain extent. He can definitely be said to be resourceful and resourceful. The Han Nu army was originally brave and skilled in battle. With this kind of commander, it will certainly be a very difficult bone to chew. Therefore, to defeat the Han Nu, it's not enough to just dismantle the alliance. The most important thing is still this virtuous king. However, this virtuous king is not without weaknesses. After all, the Han Nu are also fighting for power. This kind of thing, everywhere is a temptation. There will always be people who want to monopolize power. Once someone becomes an obstacle, naturally they will think of ways to get rid of them, even if this person is very important to the country and the people. It's precisely because he's important that he has to be eliminated. That's right. This kind of person, unless he sits in the highest position, will always attract the most enemies. He will be restrained and obstructed by all sides. Therefore, this man in front of her was the best. He hid his power deeply, but on the surface, he was unscrupulous and flamboyant. He was simply the model of doing things in a low-key way and being a high-profile person. Jingwan sat on his lap and pulled at his face. Therefore, after being reborn, it was indeed a cheat. He had the advantage in all aspects, especially this man's outstanding ability. If he still couldn't win, then there probably wouldn't be a winner in life in this world. A few days later, Li Hongyuan and Jingwan received news about Su Mingzhang. According to the time, he should have arrived at the banishment site. However, the person who arrived was not Su Mingzhang, but another person who looked similar to Su Mingzhang. Because the locals had never seen Su Mingzhang before, even if it was a portrait, they didn't suspect a bit. So, where did Su Mingzhang get swapped? No one knows. Li Hongyuan said indifferently. Your Highness, please forgive me. She didn't dare to explain. Should we immediately send people to investigate? Li Hongyuan waved his hand. Enough, don't worry about it. Since they found someone to replace him, that means he changed his identity. The world is so big, where are we going to find him? This matter was originally expected. Cutting off his path of survival, a person like Su Mingzhang will not remain silent. He will definitely think of a way to come back, even if he has to give up his identity. Jingwan also looked indifferent. She didn't care much about it, but we don't know where he will come from. In Qiyuan, there might be a young general, but it's impossible to have a young minister or a young first-rank official. Su Mingzhang is in his 30s, and he is no longer allowed to take the imperial examination. He has to climb up step by step. Li Hongming can't wait. After all, Li Hongming needs help now. So, for now, the Northwest is the only place he can go. For now. Is there another place he can go? Or is there going to be war in other places? Who knows? Besides, even if there is no war, there are many ways to create one. No matter how capable I am, I can't have people all over Qiyuan. However, I can send a letter to Fu Yunting and ask him to pay attention. After all, the possibility of going to the Northwest is the highest. It's just that there shouldn't be any news in a short time. If he wants to be promoted, he must show his face in front of the general. If he doesn't have enough military achievements and performance, how can he stand in front of the general? If we don't pay attention to where Su Mingzhang is going, will they succeed? Jingwan felt that some people really couldn't be underestimated. Maybe. No one knows if there will be any accidents until the last step. Moreover, not everyone who gives up their pen to join the army can stand up. Even if there is someone to help them, they are still stubborn. Even if they are forcibly helped up, there will be a time when they will be exposed. Sooner or later, they won't be able to stand up. Has Yuan ever thought of killing the people on the way to prevent future trouble? Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan with a little surprise. It seems that Wan has been reading so many files during this period of time, and it has been quite effective. What does this have to do with the files? They are two completely different things. I just feel that doing this is more in line with your style of doing things. Wan, I don't think I will directly kill people related to the Su clan. Otherwise, the problem with Su Mingzhang wouldn't be so complicated to solve. After all, he raised me, so I have to leave some leeway when doing things. I can't let people say that I don't care about friendship at all. Jingwan only gave him 2 words. Was the king of hell a person who cared about reputation, face, and friendship? Li Hongyuan sighed and touched Jingwan's head. Give a little hope, then crush it. Give a little more hope, then crush it. Let people fall into madness and despair little by little. Isn't that more interesting? Moreover, I also want to see how tenacious the Su clan is, and how many times they can climb up. To torture people like this, how much hatred did they have? It seems that before, someone's attitude towards noble consort Su hadn't reached this point. When did it start to change? Jingwan's eyes flashed. If that's the case, then let's wait and see. Li Hongyuan kissed Jingwan. Some things are still just guesses. I still need to verify them. Once I've checked them out, I'll tell you, okay? You've already told me your deepest secret. Would I still care about this? Li Hongyuan had spent some time sorting out some things from his previous life. Because it had been a long time, he spent a lot of time unraveling things bit by bit. Then, he really did discover some things that he had overlooked before, some things that could be said to be very important. And these things should be verified very soon. Half a month later, solid news of victory came from the northwest again. Commander-in-Chief Fu Yunting had schemed to drive a wedge between the Xiongnu Alliance and the Xiongnu Alliance, causing the Xiongnu Alliance to fall apart. There was a mistake in the battle plan. The Xiongnu Alliance didn't act according to plan, and the Xiongnu commander-in-chief was besieged by Fu Yunting. He was injured and fled in defeat. In one battle, tens of thousands of Xiongnu were wiped out, and a prefecture was taken back. The imperial court was really happy for once. They sang praises to Lu Qingdi and Qi Yuan. Lu Qingdi didn't need to think too much about what he was thinking. At least on the surface, he had a stiff smile on his face, which made people feel uncomfortable. Ruan Ruizhong and Luo Peishan lowered their eyes. Both of them said that they were old and dim-sighted. The weather was hot, and beads of sweat could get into their eyes, so they didn't see anything. The others continued to be happy, and continued to make things difficult for the emperor. This kind of joy didn't last long. The problem with some of the granaries was suddenly revealed. The granaries that were supposed to be mobilized were not filled with grain, but with sand and stones. The grain and fodder transported to the northwest would run out. The consumption of grain for 200,000 to 300,000 soldiers couldn't be underestimated. It was a huge amount every day. Moreover, they didn't eat as much as they wanted. Once the grain was cut off, the consequences would be unimaginable. No one could win a battle with an empty stomach. At this time, such a thing happened. It was like a basin of ice water was poured over them in the middle of winter. It chilled them to the core. Only Wan Ruizhong and Luo Peishan looked at each other. The emperor really took action. Although the grain and fodder was jointly handled by the Ministry of Revenue and the Ministry of War, the former was responsible for the collection and purchase, and the latter was responsible for the transportation. However, other people were not ignorant of this. It was reasonable to say that in this special period, there was a shortage of manpower. Other people had to make way for other things. However, from the beginning of the war, the people who were really busy were only the people of these two ministries. According to Lu Qingdi's words, everyone had their own duties. They couldn't put other matters of Qi Yuan aside because of the war. What he said seemed to be very reasonable, and he seemed to be very confident about the war in the northwest. However, after thinking about it carefully, the Ministry of Revenue and the Ministry of War were so busy, and they barely managed to settle the matter of grain and fodder. After transferring some people from other places, how could they be busier than the Ministry of Revenue and the Ministry of War? Others didn't know, but Wan Ruizhong and Luo Peishan got the news from Li Hongyuan. In fact, there were already clues about part of the empty granaries, but it was hidden. In fact, this matter had been reported to the emperor through the blackguard from the beginning. Lu Qingdi kept it a secret. They still hoped that the emperor was thinking about the overall situation. At this time, it would do more harm than good to make the matter known. But now, they were completely disappointed. The grain had to be thoroughly investigated, and the shortage of grain had to be found from other places. Later on, some of the grain could be transferred from the south, but it would be too late in the near future. They had to buy from the people. The grain merchants would make up the bulk, followed by the rich families. If they really couldn't do it, they would have to collect from the people. Someone had to do all these things, and it had to be done quickly. However, Luchingdi absolutely didn't want things to be done quickly. The Ministry of Revenue definitely didn't have enough manpower. Then, should they send people to help? In fact, everyone knew that this wasn't an easy task, and it was easy to offend people. After all, grain was the lifeblood of the people. Luchingdi was angry that the courtiers didn't do anything at this critical time, but he didn't think so in his heart. After all, there were so many soldiers, and he was conflicted in his heart. Prince Rui was once again called by his mother. The mother and son also whispered to each other. Not long after, Prince Rui played the music and became the emperor, willing to share his father's worries. Because of the matter of his sister, Princess Minxiang, Prince Rui didn't have a proper job until now. Luchingdi narrowed his eyes and looked at Prince Rui for a moment. Approved. Third brother, this matter is very important, but the people are the foundation of the country. You should do your best, but don't act rashly. Yes, father. This son understands. Those who didn't know would think that Luchingdi was thoughtful, but those who knew would think that he was simply telling Prince Rui to take it slow and not rush. It was so chilling. Originally, in their opinion, although Luchingdi didn't have many achievements, he had done his best for the country and the people. Although he wasn't very outstanding, he was still qualified. However, they didn't expect that for some unknown reason, he would ignore so many soldiers who guarded the country for him. Such an immoral emperor was no different from a fatuous one. https://11/11807/12646848. Chapter 495. If they really wanted to exterminate the Fu family, at most, they would just throw away some of their reputation and directly kill them. However, the emperors of the Qiyuan dynasty from generation to generation were all the same. For the sake of their reputation and face, they could do many, many things and disregard many, many lives. If it was Jin Qin Wang, he could just find an excuse to exterminate your entire family. He didn't care if other people believed in the so-called reason. If he exterminated them, other people wouldn't dare to say anything in front of him. As an emperor, although he paid attention to the implementation of benevolence, he still had to have the courage. Especially when facing an opponent that the emperor himself felt was a threat, there was no need to be polite. As the emperor, he was the most lawless and unreasonable person. Killing people was a privilege among privileges. From this point of view, Jin Qin Wang simply didn't look like a descendant of the Li family, especially the bloodline of the emperor. Well, he shouldn't think like that. After all, wasn't that suspecting that the imperial Gui Fei had cuckolded the emperor? Even if Jin Qin Wang didn't look like Luchingdi, he shouldn't have such thoughts. Not to mention that the imperial Gui Fei herself came from a prestigious family, she would never do such a thing. Just talk about how the emperor treasured the imperial Gui Fei and couldn't wait to tie her to his belt. How could the imperial Gui Fei have anything to do with others? Guan Ruizhong and Luo Peishan both kept silent. Jin Qin Wang was already prepared, so there was no need to worry. However, from this point of view, Luchingdi had been thrown far behind. However, the one with a truly terrible reputation, the one rumored to be ruthless and cruel, was clearly Jin Qin Wang, while Luchingdi was still a benevolent monarch on the surface. The former was wholeheartedly thinking for the soldiers, while the latter disregarded the life and death of the soldiers. How ironic was it that these two did things? Once Prince Rui took the task, he quickly left the capital with his men to handle the matter. Everyone in the capital was watching and waiting. Moreover, they all had their own thoughts. Prince Rui could be said to have absolutely carried out Luchingdi's orders. He didn't take the grain by force, the price of the grain couldn't be high, and he directly issued a death order. Anyone who violated the order would be severely punished. If so, how could they buy grain? persuade and coax, say all kinds of good words. And even lower himself. No matter what Prince Rui's original intention was, the people in charge of executing the order understood it as such. In any case, they relied on the government to make a living. Why should they treat these lowly commoners with such attitude? How could he not be angry? Prince Rui only wanted to do his best for his imperial father, but he had unknowingly offended these people completely. Moreover, would they not do it just because he told them not to? How many pairs of eyes do you, Li Hongming, have? How far can you see? Feigning compliance on the surface but opposing in secret had always been their specialty. Not taking it by force. They were government officials, how could they take the grain by force? It was people who delivered the grain to them. Can't the price of the grain be high? Don't worry, they will only spend 1 copper coin on something that costs 3 copper coins. They won't even use a single copper coin. What about handing the rest back? Of course I'll put it in my own pocket. Can't I be quick? Of course, they spent most of the day bragging and drinking. Even if they wanted to be quick, they couldn't be quick. Originally, the grain merchants were the ones who sold the bulk of the grain. However, these people had also received benefits from the grain merchants. The grain merchants sold the grain at a higher price, and the grain was also old and moldy. They even hid some of it and didn't give out all of it. As for where Li Hongming was, his orders were strictly carried out within a certain range. Therefore, he did not notice that something was wrong at all. As he watched the rations slowly increase, he secretly calculated the time in his heart. When he felt that it was about time, he slowly sent out the first batch of rations. At this time, the Northwest Army was almost out of rations. Even if they borrowed some from the local people and tightened their belts, they would be able to last for 3 days at most. Everything that happened was reported back by Li Hongyuan's people in detail, but Lu Qingdi and many court officials didn't know anything. Jingwan saw it first. Prince Rui hasn't come into contact with people at this level. He thought that as a prince, his orders would be carried out absolutely. After all, he was used to being praised in the capital. Those people below him also did their best to help him get the throne. It can be said that they followed his orders and prohibitions. But he didn't know that everywhere he went, there would be complaints from the people. Clearly, the serious flood in the south 2 years ago didn't happen because it was handled properly and in time. Wan, just say that he is stupid. Why do you have to be so tactful? He was not the only one who went. He was overconfident, headstrong, and didn't listen to others' advice. Jingwan didn't comment on this, but why did Prince Rui take the initiative to get involved in this matter? He even carried out His Majesty's orders. Could it be that he knows something? Instead of saying that he knows something, it's better to say that his mother told him something, and that the Su family knows something. This is impossible. How could the Su family know something that no one else in the imperial family knows? If only imperial concubine Su knows, then it can be said that His Majesty's brain is not clear and told her. Jingwan looked at Li Hongyuan's unchanged expression and thought quickly. She suddenly thought of a possibility. If the Su family really knows, then it can only mean that the Fu family's matter is related to the Su family. Is this the thing that Yuan wants to investigate? Now tell me, is it clear or has there been a big breakthrough? I've checked the history of that year. Although the Su family is not prominent now, the Su family should have been one of the 4 dukes and 9 marquises. Moreover, it should have been a duke. However, for some reason, they didn't even get a marquis in the end. Is Yuan suspecting that this has something to do with His Majesty's targeting of the Fu family? Li Hongming's actions are not as simple as a suspicion. Even if I wanted to do something in the imperial palace, it would be impossible. So, there is no way to start the investigation from the imperial palace. But the Su family is different. His tone showed that he didn't take the Su family seriously at all. It seemed that even if he had to turn the Su family upside down, he would still find the answer. If it was confirmed, then he would have a big grudge with imperial concubine Su and the Su family. After all, according to a certain person's reaction, he blamed imperial concubine Su and the Su family for everything related to himself in his previous life. It was no wonder that his attitude towards imperial concubine Su had changed so completely. After all, even if imperial concubine Su drugged him, sterilized him, and harmed his body, his emotions were still stable and he didn't even care about it. Send a set of things to official Wang and official Luo. Tell them to prepare. Since Li Hongming took the initiative to jump in, if we don't teach him a lesson, wouldn't we be letting him down? Originally, she wanted to keep it for a while, but since it was like this, she would collect some interest first. He's no longer your hidden guard. If you're not used to it, just call him Qian Yi. It's the same as Gongzhou. In order to ease the heavy atmosphere, Jingwan teased. Li Hongyuan tilted his head. As long as you're happy, Wan. What do you mean by as long as I'm happy? It's for you to get used to it. Don't put everything on my head. Qian Yi, did you hear that? Hurry up and thank the princess for giving you a name. Li Hongyuan turned his spearhead to Imperial Guard Qian. Imperial Guard Qian felt that he was being shot while lying down. Anyone could tell that the princess was joking. After all, Gongzhou said to the outside world that he was brought back from Jiangnan. If his name was added with numbers, wouldn't it be suspicious for no reason? However, Imperial Guard Qian still respectfully thanked Jingwan. The world was big, but his master was the most important. Have you sent the grain to the northwest? So, he forgot about the habit in the blink of an eye. Replying to the prince, according to the time, it should be here today. Whether it was an Yi or Qian Yi, it was just a title. As hidden guards, they didn't care about it. Li Hongyuan nodded. These soldiers, he still wanted to keep them for the war in the future. He didn't want to lose them for no reason. At the same time, Fu Yunting was gritting his teeth in the barracks. He still didn't understand why the emperor did this. When their Fu family went to war, they would never just bury themselves in the war. They would always try to understand the relevant matters. Even if they didn't know that they were going to war, but as a member of the Fu family, they would still subconsciously try to understand. And because of Jin Qinhuang's relationship, it wasn't difficult for him to find out. With the current situation of Qi Yuan, even if they supported the Northwest Army for a year and a half, it wouldn't be a problem. But now, they were telling him that there was a problem. The grain didn't arrive on time. If they put some thought into it, this kind of situation would never happen. Why the hell was this? Moreover, the news was only sent when the food supply was close to running out. If the soldiers' daily meals were reduced a little in advance, they would be able to hold on for a little longer. If they even forgot to send a message in advance, who would believe it? Even if they wanted to take Fu Yunting's life, even if they wanted the Fu family to be destroyed, this world belonged to him, surnamed Li. These soldiers were also surnamed Li's soldiers. Did he not feel the slightest heartache? These things couldn't be let the soldiers know. If they knew, it would shake their morale. If the person who worked for them didn't care about their life and death, who would still work for them? They could only be carried by him. General. The tent door was opened and two resolute-looking young men came in. Dressed in armor, one hand holding a weapon at their waist and the other holding a helmet. Impressively, these two were the young generals that were selected to go to war with Fu Yunting. In these 3 months, it was like they were reborn. Come, sit. Fu Yunting said expressionlessly. General, the food in the common people's homes has basically been taken out. They really can't hold on anymore. But in the current situation, we can't even withdraw our troops. After all, if we withdraw, the common people will. One of the young men said in an unusually pained tone. Before going to the battlefield, he had always underestimated war. It was so cruel and so shocking. The smallest person could also do the greatest things. But now, they couldn't protect them. Thinking about it made him feel bitter. Withdraw. Of course we can't withdraw. Fu Yunting clenched his fists. No matter what, he couldn't give up on the common people. But what about the soldiers under his command? Would they starve to death? Or would they be killed by the enemy and die because they were powerless to resist? General, General. Another young general hurried in. He was panting because he came too quickly. Fu Yunting stood up. He thought that the Xiongnu army had already known about the situation at Qiyuan and was advancing again. Don't panic. No, General. It's that someone outside the camp sent food and asked us to send people to receive it. The convoy transporting the food is less than 30 miles away from the camp. The surprise came so suddenly. Quick, come with me. There were several people outside the camp. They looked like merchants, but they also looked like common people. After a short conversation between the two sides, Fu Yunting also confirmed that the food was real. 30 miles was completely within the range of scouts. It was only because it was at his rear and was in an absolutely safe position that it didn't attract any attention. And the amount of food was also huge. Not to mention them, even the entire Northwest Army could last for half a month. According to the other side, the soldiers were serving the country and the people. They couldn't do much, so they could only do their best. The other generals were extremely grateful to them. The food was delivered at the right time. But Fu Yunting called the leader to say a few words in private. His Highness asked me to tell General that you can fight without worry. He will take care of the matters at the rear. This batch of food is more than enough to last until the next batch arrives. Moreover, the food from the south is also on the way. We won't let the soldiers starve to protect the country. Before Fu Yunting could open his mouth, the other side spoke first. Fu Yunting's hanging heart finally calmed down. Go and report to His Highness. Fu Yunting can guarantee with his head that we won't let him down. General is too serious. I asked General to send people with me to bring the food back. Good. Fu Yunting immediately gathered enough people to bring the food back. Because they knew that the food had arrived, the originally listless soldiers suddenly became excited and wanted to help. When they saw the large caravan of food and even livestock accompanying them, many people were almost drooling. Fu Yunting slightly narrowed his eyes. It seems that he neglected his rear. Even if the enemy can't come, what about his own people? If the emperor can do something like suddenly running out of food, then maybe he can send another group of people to cause trouble without any preparation. If they happen to be on the battlefield, their own people can casually stab them with a knife. It's enough to be fatal. Therefore, the rear must also be paid attention. Even if they receive the order in advance, they must also be on guard. In addition to the main grain, there were also a lot of dried vegetables, cured meat, and even dried salted fish from the south. Not to mention the livestock. Not to mention the previous months of war. Even when there wasn't a war, there wasn't such a rich supply. Moreover, many of the soldiers were born ordinary people. Their families may not even eat meat for a month, so they were really drooling. Because of the hot weather, the food doesn't taste good even if it doesn't spoil easily. There's not a lot of meat, so it's better to eat it as soon as possible. What's wrong with that? There's nothing to eat. You can even eat tree roots. You don't smell good, but I smell very good. A young general next to him couldn't help but sniff. He looked like he was craving for food. Good for you. When you were in the capital, you ate all kinds of delicacies, Fu Yunting scolded jokingly. General, you said that you were in the capital. It's been a few months. How can it be the same? I reckon that when I return to the capital in the future, I will be able to eat an entire table. However, in the future, I won't be so picky and waste food. Sometimes, being able to eat is already a great blessing. He sighed. Everyone else had similar feelings as well. Alright, let's not talk nonsense. Once we're full, we'll chase the Xiongnu people out, take back the territory of Qi Yuan, and avenge the people who died. That's the most important thing. The soldiers shouted 3 times. They were full of morale. There were only a few tens of thousands of people in the place where Fu Yunting was stationed. Because they still had to send the food out, they had to be careful during the process. Fu Yunting arranged everything and returned to his tent. His expression was exceptionally cold. Then, he spread out a piece of paper and grinded it. He picked up a brush and wrote a memorial. He exaggerated the situation of the soldiers in the army before they received the food. He described all kinds of sad and difficult situations. It could be said that he was in tears. He also described the joy after receiving the food. He even praised the people who went through life and death with them and the loyal and righteous actions of the caravan who delivered the food. He wanted to see if the emperor, as an emperor who cut off food for his soldiers, would be angrier and want to kill him when he saw these, or would he feel guilty? Was he worthy of being an emperor? In addition, there was another letter. It was written to inform him about the food shortage. The time was clearly written. There was no time at first, but Li Hongyuan sent a person who was good at imitating. That method could completely pass off the fake as the real thing. It was just adding a date. It was too easy. The date was written 2 or 3 days before Fu Yunting received the letter. He wanted to ask, in the entire court, did no one consider the matter of notifying in advance? They were caught off guard and were not prepared at all. If it were not for the righteous people sending the food, would the soldiers of Qi Yuan have starved to death instead of dying on the battlefield? To put it bluntly, Fu Yunting wanted to disgust him. Therefore, when this memorial was sent back, it was not sent as an urgent report. It was sent as an ordinary memorial by an official. It was also not encrypted. Therefore, the first person to see it would not be Lu Qingdi. Moreover, he believed that with Prince Jin around, many people would see this memorial. Although it was an ordinary memorial, it was sent out from the northwest battlefield. Therefore, the speed was definitely not slow. At most, it would take 7 or 8 days. It was definitely not like the other memorials sent by local officials. If it was slow, it would take less than a month. After sending out the memorial, Fu Yunting wrote another letter and handed it to the personal guard. The person Li Hongyuan left him to be in charge of the messenger. After that, Fu Yunting did not care anymore. In any case, he knew that he was not liked by Prince Jin. Other than the war, he did not expect Prince Jin to tell him about the matters in the capital. Not being able to see Lu Qingdi's reaction with his own eyes, Fu Yunting still felt a little regretful. However, when he thought of all the things that Prince Jin had done, he could not help but rejoice in his misfortune. For the sake of Prince Jin, you did not care about the severity of the matter. In the end, you were still schemed against by your son. Every time you almost vomited blood, you only thought that it was a freak combination of factors and completely did not know that someone was playing tricks behind your back. Thinking of this, Fu Yunting felt that his anger towards Lu Qingdi dissipated a lot. It could be imagined how wonderful Lu Qingdi's expression would be after he saw the memorial. At that time, all the civil and military officials in the court basically knew about the contents of the memorial. Lu Qingdi even had the thought of flaying Fu Yunting alive. Miscalculation, it was truly a miscalculation. He did not want to touch Fu Yunting. Even if he did not have the strict teachings of his father since childhood, he was still an expert in battle. However, the more it was like this, the more it showed that Fu Yunting had wild ambitions. Otherwise, how could he learn those things? Therefore, Fu family really could not be left alive. Not only Wu Anho's branch, the entire Fu family could not be left alive. Even if they were the closest to Wu Anho's residence, they did not have many interactions. Who knew if they were just doing it for him to see? Lu Qingdi still did not regret sending Fu Yunting to the battlefield. Because that was the only way to find the crime of confiscating and exterminating the entire family. The courtiers praised the righteousness of the merchants while questioning who was responsible for such a big matter and who should be punished severely. There were still other important matters to solve. Naturally, it was time to vigorously search for the whereabouts of the grain. It was not a small amount of grain, but hundreds of thousands of dawn. So much grain was definitely not something that one or two people could swallow. This was a very serious case of embezzlement. If they did not investigate, they would not be able to appease the citizens. If they did not investigate, they would be letting down the soldiers who almost got into trouble. Because they did not know Lu Qingdi's true thoughts, they all expressed their own opinions. Lu Qingdi watched from above. He was so aggrieved that he was about to bleed internally. Because from his own point of view, the courtiers were right. If the general was not Fu Yunting, he would only be angrier than them. He would want to find out the vermin even more. Enough, all of you shut up for me. Lu Qingdi roared. He rubbed his throbbing temples. This matter cannot be suppressed. Once it is suppressed, he would be questioned as the emperor. Since the grain was gone, he could investigate from this aspect. But if this matter was not discovered in time, it would be the responsibility of the Ministry of Revenue. Also, if he did not send a letter to the Northwest Army in time, it would be easy to find a scapegoat. However, if this continues, the courtiers will sooner or later understand that the emperor's attitude towards Fu Yunting, Wu Anho, and the Fu family was not as simple as just disliking Fu Yunting. The emperor will not accept them and entrust them with heavy responsibilities just because of their military exploits. Because Lu Qingdi's emotions will be completely exposed sooner or later. It was obvious that this matter was of great importance. It was also a cooperation between the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court. At the same time, the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet and the Minister of Personnel were also involved. The latter two were not there to investigate the case, but to deter the emperor. There was also Li Suyen who brought along some of the black-robed guards to deal with any troublesome matters that might arise. The few important officials of the Ministry of Revenue who were guilty bodies could not be left out. This group of people also left the capital very quickly. However, they only left the capital for 2 days before they ran into refugees. Qi Yuan has been having good weather for the past 2 years. Even the flood 2 years ago, there were no refugees in the north. This year, there were no natural disasters or man-made disasters. So how did the refugees come? The others looked at each other in dismay. Ruan Ruizhong and Luo Peishan were well aware of the situation, but they were also surprised on the surface. Both of them were experts at acting. As the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet, they were responsible for assisting the emperor in handling the world's affairs. Naturally, they had to ask about the refugees. If they didn't ask, they wouldn't know. But once they did, many people's hearts almost jumped out of their chests. Especially those who supported Prince Rui. Prince Rui had just been released from prison, and now he's causing trouble again. If this matter was proven to be true, then it would not be as simple as a fine of salary and confinement. All of them were roaring in their hearts. Prince Rui didn't understand, but didn't the people around him understand as well? How did such a thing happen? Although not all of Prince Rui's subordinates worked for him, there were still 2 or 3 of them who were his trusted aides. They felt wronged and depressed. At the beginning, they had told Prince Rui that it was inappropriate because it was a special period and it was allowed to use some special means. However, Prince Rui didn't listen to them and insisted that he knew what he was doing. He also told them that those who were responsible for collecting grains shouldn't be trusted easily and should be vigilant. When Prince Rui saw the peace and prosperity in the Mu 3 Mu, he told them that they were thinking too much and that no matter how bold they were, they wouldn't dare to disobey him. He said it twice, but the master didn't listen and even thought that he was tired of it. Anyone would feel disappointed. The grain's destination hadn't been investigated yet, and this happened. Obviously, they couldn't just ignore it. Therefore, they finally decided to split into two groups. It could be said that Prince Rui had stirred up a big problem and would almost be escorted back to the capital. Therefore, Li Suyen would definitely be there. And this matter was relatively clear. The Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court only sent a small number of people. It was just that these people needed to be settled down and local officials needed to cooperate. Ruan Ruizhong decided to go personally. When Prince Rui saw Ruan Ruizhong and the others, it couldn't be said that he wasn't surprised. Suppressing the doubts in his heart, he exchanged a few pleasantries and said that he was about to send the third batch of grain. Ruan Ruizhong looked at him and sighed. His ability was actually not bad, but he wasn't Prince Jin's opponent at all. Along the way, he also understood that those refugees, 200 to 300 people, were actually from a few nearby villages. In fact, it wasn't to the point that they had to leave their homes. They would do so and even avoid the local officials. To put it bluntly, it was arranged by people. However, because they didn't go too far, it wasn't easy to investigate. Moreover, after sending them back, there really wasn't a bit of food left. They felt that the capital was prosperous and the emperor was there, so he should make decisions for them. Could you say that they didn't think it through and couldn't reach the capital like this? Could you say that they did wrong? It was just a bait to draw out the mess that Prince Rui had created. So what if there were suspicions? These commoners didn't know anything. In the end, they just felt that a certain person with ulterior motives felt that Prince Rui was heartless and hoped to attract the attention of the imperial court. If they couldn't catch this person with ulterior motives, it was impossible to kill these foolish commoners. Ruan Ruizhong explained everything simply. They wanted to invite Prince Rui back to the capital. Prince Rui was completely dumbfounded and couldn't speak at all. Before taking on the task, he fully thought that this time he would be able to please his father emperor, but in the end. Although he wasn't shackled, but in Li Hongming's heart, he still felt that he was being treated like a released person. However, he couldn't say anything. They, the princes, still feared father emperor's blackguard. Moreover, because they didn't find out the reason behind the assassination, Lu Qingdi finally dismissed the commander of the blackguard and let him go back early to take care of his child. Now, it could be said that Li Suyen had the final say in the blackguard. Although he was still in charge, there were other people who knew about it. Obviously, the blackguard wouldn't have a commander for the time being. When they returned to the capital, Ruan Ruizhong had already prepared the memorial. The efficiency of the blackguard was also very efficient. They had already figured out the whole story. Li Suyen had also written the memorial. Lu Qingdi was still puzzled. After reading the memorial, he was so angry that he fell backwards and directly smashed the memorial onto the face of Prince Rui, who was kneeling below. Idiot, idiot, idiot. Why did I give birth to such an idiot like you? Lu Qingdi's roar could be heard even from far away outside the hall. Prince Rui's face had been stripped clean by Lu Qingdi. Prince Rui clenched his fists, but lowered his head to hide the storm in his eyes. He didn't say anything. He was very clear that he did bear most of the responsibility for this matter. However, it didn't mean that he could tolerate being fooled by those ants that he could kill with one slap. After venting his anger, Lu Qingdi was unusually tired. This was once his favorite son. He felt that he was excellent in every way and once regarded him as his successor. However, as he came into contact with more things, his problems were also exposed, and not just a little. Get out. Go back and reflect on your mistakes. Cultivate your mind and character, and read more books. Luchingdi said lightly. Father. This punishment seemed to be harmless, but there was no time limit. Moreover, Luchingdi didn't even have any emotions. There was nothing worse than this. Moreover, it was clearly done according to his wishes, which led to this result. Now, he didn't give any face at all. This was too heartless. Get out. Prince Rui resisted the trembling of his body. He didn't want to be thrown out and lose even his last bit of dignity. This son takes his leave. However, the resentment and hatred in his heart were about to solidify. Most of it was directed at his good father, Luchingdi. Prince Rui's face was gloomy. No one dared to go forward and provoke him. However, there were exceptions. Prince Kong blocked Prince Rui's way. Third Prince, did you mess up your job and get reprimanded by father? Oh, it's a small matter. Which one of us brothers hasn't been reprimanded before? Don't take it to heart. When father's anger subsides, everything will be fine. The gloating on his face couldn't be more obvious. Get out. Prince Rui brushed him aside and left directly. Now, he couldn't maintain any of his elegance. Prince Kong was angry. You. He suddenly shut his mouth. Li Hongming had always been good at putting on an act. He was gentle to outsiders. He didn't even act like this when he was fired from the Ministry of Personnel last time. It was obvious that this matter would only be more serious. Go and find out what's going on. It wasn't a secret, so it wasn't difficult to find out. His subordinates deceived their superiors and even dared to fool the imperial court's prince. Luchingdi certainly wouldn't sit by and do nothing. He had already ordered Li Suyen to dispatch the blackguards to arrest all the related people from top to bottom and deal with them severely. However, after imperial concubine Su learned of the matter, she fainted from anger. It was unknown whether she blamed her son for not doing a good job or secretly hated herself for coming up with such a bad idea. In fact, many people were like Prince Kong. Originally, no one wanted to take the job. Li Hongming was so eager to take it. They thought he was very capable. In the end, he didn't do it well and even got himself involved. Wasn't that just making people clap their hands in joy? It wasn't easy for imperial concubine Su to wake up. After waking up, her health became worse and worse. However, this was a very normal thing. Imperial concubine Su sent everyone out and stayed alone for at least an hour. Then, she let her mother enter the palace. Because of Su Mingzhang's matter, the old lady's condition wasn't good either. However, the Su family knew very well that they were in the same boat as imperial concubine Su and her son. If they couldn't get better, then no one could. Therefore, no matter how bad it was, she forced herself to enter the palace. Imperial concubine Su's heart ached when she saw her mother's trembling appearance. However, there was no other way. She couldn't leave this matter to others. This time, imperial concubine Su didn't say anything else. She just let her mother take 2 letters out. One was for her son, Li Hongming, and the other was for the right commander-in-chief, Shen Shuhan. The letter for Li Hongming was just a passing thing. As Shen Shuhan's aunt, this old lady's weight was more important than others. It also showed the seriousness of the matter. After sending out these 2 letters, imperial concubine Su completely quieted down. She didn't even make any moves against Jingwan. She didn't think about anything else and began to recuperate peacefully. From this point of view, it was enough to show that imperial concubine Su's mental fortitude was definitely beyond the reach of most people in the world. At the same time, Fu Yunting sent back a report. It said that the grain sent to the northwest was mixed with a lot of sand and gravel. There was also a lot of old grain and moldy grain. It wasn't impossible to eat it after cleaning it up. However, it was said that the grain was bought from grain merchants. Was the official in charge of this matter deceived? In addition, it was also extremely inappropriate for the grain to be in the hands of ordinary people. Therefore, the emperor was requested to investigate and purge this matter. In addition, 2 days after those righteous soldiers sent the grain, the Xiongnu launched another large-scale attack. If it wasn't for that batch of grain, the soldiers would have been hungry and powerless to fight. At that time, it was very likely that the entire army would have been wiped out. The defense line would have collapsed, and the Xiongnu would have launched a large-scale attack. Fu Yunting only requested that those people be praised and rewarded in his own name. Very good, another crime was added to Prince Rui's list. However, there was no need to be calculative about Prince Rui. However, those black-hearted grain merchants were unlucky again. Many of their goods were confiscated. However, there were also people who suggested that these black-hearted merchants should be punished. Moreover, General Fu's suggestion was indeed appropriate. Not to mention other things, at least they should be given the title of righteous merchant. If such people were supported, it was believed that the common people would benefit. It was because these people were meddling in other people's business that his plan was ruined. Now, he wanted to give them the title of righteous merchant to facilitate their business in the future. Could he not give it to them? No, he couldn't. They had helped his soldiers and even saved the Qi Yuan to a certain extent. How could he not show any appreciation for such a great achievement? Therefore, he gritted his teeth and personally wrote the 2 words righteous merchant and sent it out with great fanfare. In fact, as Fu Yunting said, when the Xiongnu attacked, Emperor Luqingdi was initially shocked and broke out in cold sweat. However, it was only for a moment. Because it didn't happen, he didn't care. He never thought about what would happen if it happened. However, with Li Hongyuan's plan, the word happened would not appear. Until now, he still didn't reflect on himself and didn't think about replacing Fu Yunting. He still wanted to put a label on Fu Yunting. However, from Li Hongyuan's previous life, it could be seen that in Emperor Luqingdi's heart, Fu Yunting was more of a threat than the Xiongnu army. Even if he lost more than 200,000 soldiers in a few counties, it didn't matter. As long as he still had his throne, he would still be an insufferably arrogant emperor. It was no wonder that Li Hongyuan killed Emperor Luqingdi in his previous life. For such a person, even crushing his bones and scattering his ashes wouldn't be enough to vent his hatred. Jingwan looked at the letters one after another. There were all kinds of messages. She sighed and said, "The capital has been really lively recently. It's full of ups and downs. It's more exciting than a drama. We probably have to wait until the people in the Ministry of Revenue are replaced before it can stop for a while. Wan, it's too early to be at ease. Things won't stop so soon. It's you who won't stop." In Jingwan's view, as long as this person didn't stir up trouble, then things would more or less stop. Why? In Wan's eyes, am I the kind of person who looks for trouble? I also want to spend more time with Wan, right? https://11/11807/126843447. Chapter 496. Yes, you are the most reasonable. Then, Jin Wangya, after this matter, what do you want to do? Why don't you give me a heads up in advance so that I can be prepared? What do you think? Jingwan smiled. Li Hongyuan shook his head and smiled, I can't say. Jingwan shrugged her shoulders, indicating that she didn't care. This kind of thing was not the first time, she just had to get used to it. Jingwan's curiosity was not as strong as it was at the beginning. In any case, when the time came, she would know. The final result would probably be three kinds: calm, surprised, and happy. It would not exceed this range. She just didn't know what it would be this time. However, looking at his smile, the possibility of it being happy was relatively high. Then, she would just have to wait. No matter how lively the capital was, no matter how cruel the Northwest was, Jingwan and the others' days in the country residence were more or less the same. Everyone had no time to care about them. As for the people who went to the neighboring country residence, because of the recent Emperor Lu Cheng's temper, most of them were warned by their elders to go out less often. Even if they came, they would absolutely not look for trouble. Leisure, leisure, pure leisure. Just like Jingwan and the others, the impact did not seem to be big. Under this kind of situation, the people who went to inquire about the whereabouts of the large quantities of grain returned and set off a big storm. Hundreds of thousands of share of grain went missing. It was fine if it was not discovered, but once it was discovered, there would definitely be clues under careful investigation. After all, it was impossible for so much grain to disappear into thin air, and no one could silently transport it away. Therefore, in the end, it could only be said that the people who touched the granary this year were unlucky. This kind of thing, one would know that it would not be the first time it happened. However, this year's people, or perhaps after last year's autumn harvest, some people's greedy hearts multiplied. Their appetites were too big, but it had always been peaceful. When it came to this year's autumn harvest, the matter could be settled. As a result, a war broke out and the granary was opened in advance. Since they couldn't get the grain back, they could only watch on helplessly. They could only hope that they wouldn't be found out, or that the higher-ups wouldn't throw them out to take the blame. When they left, the faces of the people from the Ministry of Revenue were not very good. When they returned, they were even more dejected. Even their treatment had completely changed. From this, it was clear that the disappearance of a large amount of food was most likely due to embezzlement. It might not have anything to do with the Minister of Revenue, but from his dejected appearance, he was either angry that his own people had failed to live up to his expectations, or that some important figure involved in this matter was greatly related to him. However, due to Lu Chengdi's deliberate suppression, the matter was exposed relatively late. After all, at the beginning of the war, the people who did these things knew that they would be found out sooner or later. Therefore, during these few months, they tried their best to clean up the mess. Although it was impossible to clean up the mess completely, it was true that a lot of evidence could not be found. Therefore, in the end, only some relatively important people would be thrown out. Those who really felt guilty or benefited the most would escape. After being busy for so long and not being able to catch the mastermind, many people were still depressed. Even if Luo Peishan's body was in good condition, but in the end, he was old. After rushing all the way, when he returned home, his condition wasn't very good. He was physically and mentally exhausted. Luo Peishan was originally a person who was strict with himself. The matters of the day would not easily be left for the next day. This time, when he came back, he directly returned to the main courtyard and didn't want to move. It was just that he didn't rest for long when a servant came to report that the doctor of Jin Qin Wang Fu had come to take Luo Shangshu's pulse under Wang Fei's orders. With such a filial granddaughter, even if he was tired, his heart was also warm and his body seemed to be much more relaxed. Gong Jiu took Luo Peishan's pulse and there wasn't any major problem. Basically, it was caused by the weakening of the body's functions due to old age. After a period of proper recuperation, it wouldn't affect his lifespan. It was just that he didn't dare to guarantee that his body wouldn't deteriorate. After all, this person's condition was really hard to predict. Gong Jiu gave Luo Peishan an injection to relieve the discomfort in his body. It could be said that the effect was immediate. Luo Peishan clearly felt much more relaxed and let out a big sigh of relief. Gong Jiu prescribed medicine. Whether it was out of the heart of a doctor or because of his master's instructions, he gave a few more words of advice. Even if it was the doctor of the Wangfu, the people of the Luo family were still more respectful. This was because Luo Rongyan's generation was still in the yamen and it was Luo Jingda who personally sent him out. On the way back, Luo Peishan was there saying that his granddaughter was good. His granddaughter was a considerate little cotton-padded jacket. He was disdainful of the bunch of grandchildren and also scolded the few sons who hadn't returned yet. From his words, it seemed that when they returned, they would probably have to enter the study again to receive their father's education of love. The few grandchildren wisely chose to keep their mouths shut and silently listen. If they dared to open their mouths at this time, they would have to receive the education of love now. However, at night, Luo Shangshu didn't manage to scold his sons because his second son, who was determined to climb up the social ladder, really gave him a big surprise this time. Luo Rongyan wanted to be a good father and be the support of his daughter. He abandoned his own preferences and always left the capital early and returned late. In February and March, he even left the capital for a period of time. After that, he returned a few times, but it seemed that he didn't do anything serious. Because he was the father of Jin Wangfei, his colleagues and superiors respected him and flattered him. It was originally an idle position and they wouldn't let him do anything. Even when everyone else was busy, it seemed that he still had nothing to do. How could he make progress like this? Luo Peishan was also busy and couldn't be bothered to care about him. Perhaps it was because he wanted to see what he could do. Logically speaking, if one wanted to make progress, he would find something to do even if he had nothing to do. Luo Rongyan was indeed like this, but he didn't take the usual path. Therefore, Luo Peishan didn't expect that he would actually accomplish such a big thing without anyone noticing. Luo Peishan flipped through the thing in his hands that looked like an account book. It recorded the year, month, and day, how much grain was transported from where to where, how much it was worth, which granary it was from, and even the person in charge of selling it and the other party's contact. It could be said that it was coarse compared to a normal account book. However, compared to the information that Luo Peishan and the others brought back when they went out, this thing was countless times more detailed. At the end, there was a total amount of grain that was very small compared to the amount of grain that was lost. Luo Peishan looked at the account book and then looked at his son. There was an inexplicable complicated feeling in his heart. Why did you pay attention to this? I didn't have much to do in the Ministry of Revenue, but since I wanted to do something, I naturally had to understand the most basic things about my environment. When I had nothing to do, I would look through those account books. At first, I couldn't find anything. The reason why I paid attention to it was because there was a fat boy in the Ministry of Revenue who muttered that the weight of the grain was wrong. I asked him about it. He said that as far as he knew, the grain that entered the granary was all packed in gunny sacks. There were different numbers for each type of grain, but the weight of the same type of grain should be about the same. The weight of each sack in the account book was about the same as the normal weight, but the difference in the total amount was much bigger. That was when I realized that there might be a problem with the grain. Later, I found that the problem was basically the account books that were reviewed later. The account books that entered the granary at the beginning didn't have such a problem. Because of the large number of account books, they were mixed together. When they were reviewed, the granary was rarely full. Therefore, it probably didn't attract attention. I spent some time sorting out the account books for nearly 10 years. There were problems every year, but the number of problems this year was particularly large. However, the most serious problem was from 7 years ago. Luo Peishan tapped the table with his fingertips. Although he wasn't in the Ministry of Revenue, he actually knew the affairs of the various ministries by heart. In other words, no matter which department he was thrown into, he would be able to mix in. The grain that was collected by the Ministry of Revenue every year, other than the initial entry into the granary, there were at least 2 more complicated reviews. The review time was before the next entry into the granary. However, it was impossible for the granary to only enter and not leave. Some granaries were already gone without waiting for the review. The people who entered the granary and the people who reviewed it were not the same batch. However, there was basically no one who seriously reviewed the sacks one by one. It was very easy to do so. And if there was a problem, the next year, the fake grain would be disposed of and replaced with new ones. Everything would be fine. Because there was a problem, you went to investigate. Yes. You're not young anymore, but you're acting like a brat. You act on impulse. Have you ever thought that if those people behind the scenes were to find out, you might even bring a fatal disaster to yourself, or even your entire family? Have you ever thought about this? Father, of course I've thought about it. Before I went to investigate, I made preparations. Even if it was the Ministry of Revenue's account books, I read whatever was there and didn't pick one type. When I read, I didn't make any records, so no one would notice. I also found a reasonable reason to leave the capital and didn't mention it to anyone. Even the manservant by my side didn't know what I was doing. Moreover, I didn't leave the capital for long. Logically speaking, I shouldn't be able to find anything in that little time. Luo Peishan was a little surprised. Then how did you investigate? Luo Rongyan suddenly touched his nose and was a little embarrassed. Father, well, no matter what world it is, there will always be people from all walks of life. These people know a lot of things. Perhaps they themselves don't know the value of the things they know. At most, they just spend some money. Luo Peishan smiled. He couldn't blame his son for being embarrassed. His son had always been open and honest. Sometimes, he was like an immortal. He had always disdained to associate with many people. It was a little hard for him to imagine that he would come into contact with people from all walks of life. However, he could also see that this second son really wanted to do something. He was not inflexible, flexible, and cautious enough. In the beginning, this son was the one he thought most highly of. Later, he had no choice but to give up. Now, he had given him a big surprise. He only hoped that this wouldn't happen again. Okay, leave this matter to me. I'll take care of the follow-up. Don't count on credit or anything like that. Since you really want to do something, I'll give you a little change in the position I'll give you later. Don't think about a position that's too good. However, it won't be idle anymore. This time, the Ministry of Revenue will make a big move. I'm afraid that the position won't be filled in a short time. Therefore, if you can make some achievements in the war in the Northwest, there may be a position for you after the war is over. Father, I'll listen to you. If you had listened to me earlier, would you still be in this state? Would your daughter have to acknowledge an adoptive mother before she can be a princess? Luo Peishan said angrily. Luo Rongyan shut his mouth and didn't answer. If he continued, he would be an unfilial son and an incompetent father. Okay, go back and rest. Luo Peishan started to dislike him again when he talked about the past. However, after Luo Rongyan left, Luo Peishan was also worried. How to fabricate the origin of this account book and how to make it appear reasonable. After thinking for a long time, he didn't have any good ideas. He simply let it go and handed it over to Jean Wang. It would be a waste not to use his grandson-in-law. Moreover, these people all worked for him. When they encountered trouble, if they didn't look for him, who would they look for? Luo Shangshu also had a clear conscience when it came to finding trouble for his master. When Li Hongyuan obtained the item, especially when he knew that it was his father-in-law's handiwork, he was really surprised. This father-in-law of his could be considered to be a surprise. However, no matter whether it was true or not, with this thing, the fish that could be caught could become a lot bigger. As for how to make it appear reasonably, didn't they all say that Wang had always been an expert in finding someone to take the blame? However, they couldn't take it out as it was. The current situation wasn't suitable to cause too much turmoil. At the very least, the Minister of Revenue had to be kept. Therefore, don't look at the Minister of Revenue's dejected appearance, who knew what he was thinking in his heart. However, even if they kept him, they would at most keep him until after the war in the Northwest. Li Hongyuan started to change some places and then threw it to his subordinates to copy. After it's done, sent it to Yunyang of Rouge Pavilion. Jingwan lit a candle for this once illustrious Princess He Yang, who was dragged into the water. Her legend had long disappeared in the Jianghu. She was just earning some money to spend, but she was still dragged out to wade in the muddy water. She didn't know if she would be all right the first night, but the next day, she would find an extraordinary item on the table and become irritable. Yunyang wasn't irritable, but that charming face was somewhat ferocious. His mother, she was already so old and still couldn't be at peace. However, the matter had fallen on her head. No matter what, this was her country. Naturally, she wouldn't allow those vermin to endanger this land. After calming down, Yunyang didn't say anything and directly went to Luo Peishan. She had no choice. After all, she and Luo Peishan were old lovers. When there was something, of course, she would find an acquaintance. There was no need to talk so much nonsense. She just threw it directly to Luo Peishan. Therefore, after going around in circles, this thing fell into his hands. Luo Peishan's expression was really a little wonderful. However, Luo Peishan listened to Yunyang's made-up story about the origin of this account book. His heart was even more subtle. He reluctantly controlled the expression on his face and hummed in agreement. In front of Luo Peishan, Yunyang didn't have that gorgeously dressed and seductive appearance. Her temper was quite violent. Rolling up her sleeves and slamming the table, she didn't look like a woman at all. Luo Peishan felt a headache. It must be said that Yunyang was the kind of person that he was the worst at dealing with. Therefore, whether it was decades ago or now, he could only concede defeat every time they met. This woman, if he could hide, he would do his best to hide. Wang could have chosen anyone else, why did he have to choose her? Was this revenge for throwing a hot potato to him to deal with? Well, no matter if this hot potato was hot before or not, after going around in circles, Luo Peishan didn't feel the slightest bit of sensation when he held it in his hands. After Yunyang left, because Luo Peishan found that the account book had been changed, he opened it to take a look. After discovering the changes, he quickly understood Wang's intention. Luo Peishan stroked his beard. You say, at such a young age, how could he be so shrewd and ruthless in handling matters? Sometimes, these old fellows felt ashamed of their inferiority. Facing this kind of Wang, they simply felt that he was more like an emperor than Luqing emperor. Moreover, he was used to sitting in that position and was an emperor who handled the affairs of the world with ease. He was simply born to be an emperor. However, when Luo Peishan left the study, he found that the way everyone looked at him was a bit strange. It was a bit inconceivable, especially the servant girls. When they looked at him, it was as if they were looking at a heartless man. There was a bit of indignation and also a bit of unspeakable disappointment. Luo Shangshu expressed that it was really inexplicable. What did he do to make each and every one of them have this kind of expression? Moreover, a group of servants, looking at their own master like this, what kind of appearance was that? Grandfather, I heard that the woman you raised outside came looking for you. We all thought that you were a good person, but we didn't expect that at your age, you actually. If grandmother knew, she would be so sad. Luo Jinghua and his brothers came together, and Luo Jinghua, probably under the influence of Jingwan, was not as fearful of Luo Peishan as before. Occasionally, he would even speak rudely. Now, in order to seek justice for his grandmother, he was a bit impolite. Luo Peishan blew his beard and glared. He finally understood what the servants meant. He raised his hand and slapped Luo Jinghua's head. What did this disgraceful thing say? That is the boss of Rouge Pavilion. What do you mean by the woman I raised? The woman I raised even cooperated with your younger sister to sell rouge and face powder. She came looking for me for a matter. A proper matter, do you know? Luo Jinghua also felt wronged. Grandfather, a gentleman uses his mouth and not his fists. If you say it, we will know. Besides, a woman came looking for you, who would think that it was a proper matter? So, you can't blame us for this. Don't you deserve a beating if you don't understand the situation and just listen to what others say and speak without thinking? What's wrong with a woman? Can't a woman be a proper matter? Do you still look down on women? If you have the ability, go say a few words in front of your grandmother and daughter-in-law and see what they will do. Grandfather, I know you're powerful, but you can't distort the truth like this. What do you mean we look down on women? Luo Peishan sneered. You also know what it means to distort the truth. I thought you didn't know. Luo Jinghua wanted to say more, but was pulled back by Luo Jingde. Grandfather, calm down. Don't listen to third brother's nonsense. We were just curious and came to take a look. Luo Peishan's expression was not much better. He put on a fake smile, curious. Fine, do you know about Princess Heong who was married to the northern Xiongnu? That woman just now has always been the one raising men. Which man can raise her? Go and say a few words in front of her. Let's see how many layers of skin she can peel off. The famous Princess Heong was definitely a familiar figure to scholars like them. In their impression, she was a rather unconventional and valiant woman. Although they had suspected that she was still alive at the beginning, they did not expect that she was in the capital and seemed to be an old acquaintance of their grandfather. Face her. They couldn't help but tremble. However, when they thought of the princess's nickname, they felt that something was wrong with their grandfather. Grandfather, are you sure you haven't been together before? The look in their eyes was so obvious that Luo Peishan was so angry that he almost fell over. He picked up the booklet in his hand and slapped it 3 times. All 3 of them ate the booklet. All of you, go to the study and wait for me. I'll go to the palace and test you when I come back. If you don't pass, hee. At this time, the 3 brothers were completely listless. Grandfather was the 3rd in the imperial examinations back then, and his literary attainments were comparable to that of the great Confucian granduncle. They had seen the scene of them discussing together. It could be said that it was fierce and fierce. They didn't even have the right to interrupt. Therefore, if they were seriously tested by their grandfather, they would probably die miserably. If they had known this would happen, why did they do it just now? Luo Jingde and Luo Jingming looked at Luo Jinghua with a bit of hidden bitterness in their eyes. Third brother, tell us, what should we do? Luo Peishan directly went to Lu Qingdi and handed him the booklet. When he heard Luo Peishan's background, Lu Qingdi was a bit surprised. Official Luo is familiar with Imperial Aunt. Replying to your Majesty, when I was still in office, I met Her Highness a few times. Lu Qingdi naturally knew Imperial Aunt's style very well. He didn't believe that Imperial Aunt would directly go to Luo Peishan just because they met a few times. Obviously, it wasn't that simple. It was obvious that Lu Qingdi was thinking the same way as Luo Jinghua and the others. His grandson could be casually taught a lesson, but the emperor obviously couldn't. Therefore, official Luo simply lowered his head and pretended that he didn't know. Jokes were jokes. After laughing, it was over. Serious matters were more important. Luqingdi flipped through the booklet. The more he read, the colder his face became. I didn't know that I spent so much of my salary to raise a bunch of vermin. Not only that, but they also made me lose face in front of Imperial Ant. Imperial Ant has been away from worldly affairs for many years, but in the past 2 years, she has repeatedly made a move. What face do I, as the Emperor, have? So, the focus is not on the booklet but on your face. Luo Peishan didn't want to say anything more. In any case, he was completely disappointed in the current emperor. Fortunately, Luqingdi didn't seize the booklet. Instead, he transferred it to the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court, letting them do what they should do. However, according to Luo Peishan's thoughts, it was probably because Princess Heiyang was involved that the emperor had no choice but to do so. The emperor himself might have wanted to keep the peace. Therefore, in the entire Ministry of Revenue, the right assistant minister was also removed. Under the assistant minister, half of the middle level was removed, and the bottom level was removed. The Minister of Revenue was now alone. He was even more dispirited than when he returned to the capital a few days ago. Now that things had come to this, he simply handed in a booklet and asked to retire. According to him, such a thing happened to the Ministry of Revenue, and he was also responsible for negligence. He was too ashamed to stay in this position. Your Majesty, now is the time to use people. Although Lord Qi is responsible for negligence, we can't blame him entirely. The human heart is the most difficult thing to understand. As a minister, Lord Qi has many things to do. It's normal that he didn't notice something. Why don't we let Lord Qi make up for his mistakes by properly arranging the provisions for the Northwest? The rest of the problem can wait until after the war. The Grand Secretary of the Cabinet was the first to stand up and plead. There would be a second one. One after another, people stood up to plead for mercy. However, such a scene made the Minister of Revenue feel moved on the surface, but vomit blood in his heart. He wanted to retreat in order to advance, but in the end, he had to make up for his mistakes. Where should he go? Did he have to wait until after the war? Didn't they say that the Grand Secretary was smooth and slick? Why didn't he know how to understand other people's intentions now? In the end, was he pleading for mercy, or was he swindling people? If you ask Lord Ruan, he might tell you. Of course, he was swindling people. The part of the book that was crossed out by Jin Qin Wang was all about the Minister of Revenue. It was only temporarily letting him go. Did he really think that his tail hadn't been caught and wanted to retreat in order to advance? It wasn't as beautiful as this even in his dreams. Beloved official Ruan is right. Beloved official Qi doesn't need to say anything more. Doing a good job is the most important thing. Luqingdi made the final decision. Li Hongyuan had a very accurate grasp of Luqingdi's mentality. If he really connected with a Minister of Revenue, perhaps Luqingdi would suppress the whole matter. Using a left assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue as bait already made him mentally and physically exhausted. If there was another Minister of Revenue, he wasn't even sure if his heart could bear it. The Ministry of Personnel had the right to directly appoint officials below the 4th rank. Therefore, Luo Peishan was the first to replenish the middle and lower ranks of the Ministry of Revenue. However, there was still a part of the vacancy. The Ministry of Revenue was in charge of the provisions. In the end, they were stretched too thin and had no choice but to transfer people from other places. Therefore, after going around in circles, it still reached this step. The matter finally came to an end. The final result was placed on Li Hongyuan's table. It was completely within expectations. Compared to these completely arranged matters, Jingwan was actually more interested in the gossip about her grandfather. Previously, when she found out about the part that happened in the Luo family, Jingwan could be said to be unable to stop laughing. Her family's third brother's courage had also increased. According to Li Hongyuan's words, it's just that there's no such thing. It's just a joke. That's why you can laugh. If there's really something going on, with your stubborn personality, I wonder what will happen. In his view, a man's romantic affairs were nothing more than a small matter. But there was no other way. His own wife was extremely concerned about it. This was the taboo. Jingwan sneered, what can happen? My father still had a few concubines, a few Shu children, and I still didn't do anything. When it comes to grandfather, can I still make a fuss? The problem is, you are much closer to your grandmother than to your mother. My grandmother is also not my mother. Without a man's favor, she can't live. All right, don't be agitated. Those are all outsiders. Outsiders, I am your only insider. Insider. Jingwan raised an eyebrow, only you can say these words. If it was heard by others, who knows what they would think. At most, Ben Wang is henpecked. What else can it be? Who was Jin Qin Wang? If he could be henpecked, it would probably be a joke. Now that the matter is over, what are you going to do next? This matter cannot be rushed. It needs to be planned slowly. When it's time, it will be time. I'm not in a hurry. I just casually asked. After all, in the end, I will only know the result. That's all. That's not necessarily true. But before that, I can ask Wan to watch a show first. This scene began on the second day. It was broad daylight, and everyone was doing what they were supposed to do. Imperial concubine Su's maiden home suddenly caught fire, and the fire was like adding fuel to the fire. It spread very quickly, and the fire was quite big. If it wasn't broad daylight, who knew how many people would have been burned to death? Everyone in the residence was busy putting out the fire. The people who were usually well-dressed were all covered in soot and grime. And in this situation, someone openly walked into the Su family's most important study room. 3 people searched very quickly and did not leave any traces. Moreover, with one look, one could tell that they were professionals. Because they would not randomly rummage through the books without a purpose, they would always start with a purpose. Therefore, even if it was just a piece of paper, it would not be like looking for a needle in a haystack. After all, important things would always be taken out and looked at from time to time. Moreover, when it was hidden, one would subconsciously pay attention to it. Therefore, there would always be something different. Ordinary people would not notice it, but those who had undergone professional training would be completely different. This was also the reason why they chose to start during the day instead of at night. The light was good during the day, and it would be difficult for clues to escape. It would take a lot less time. Found it. It's here. One of them found what they wanted in the most inconspicuous book on the desk. As a whole, it was only a few dozen words. The memory of the 3 people was extraordinary. They could remember things that were less than 100 words after reading it once and memorizing it in their hearts. Basically, there was no problem at all. After achieving his goal, he quickly left. Everything was the same as before he came, and the same as after he left. Unless the owner could detect it immediately, he would leave no trace if he casually moved anything. However, as the owner of this study and imperial consort Su's elder brother, would he have such eyesight? He calmly entered and calmly left without attracting any attention. Not long after, 3 identical letters fell into the hands of Li Hongyuan. Jingwan went over to read it with him. There was not much content in the first place. People who had the ability to read 10 lines at a glance could even read it with 1 glance. However, both Jingwan and Li Hongyuan took a long time. How to put it, it was a little different from what they had expected. However, it was also more complicated. Classical Chinese, when translated into vernacular, there was a little more content. The ancestors of the Fu family and the Su family were actually biological brothers from the same mother but different fathers. That's right, they had the same mother. Speaking of which, it was a little like a femme fatale, but also a little like two men fighting over a woman. The content was vague and not very clear. At that time, it was also a period of war, and some etiquette did not seem to be so much. However, here, there was a woman who first entered the Su family and gave birth to a son. Then, she seemed to have been snatched away by the Fu family. There was a suspicious point in this. The child of the Su family knew about the Fu family, but the Fu family did not know about the Su family. Therefore, this matter of snatching had to be investigated. Although the Su family was a scholarly family and the Fu family was a martial family, it could not be judged that it was not the case. Together, they had followed Taizu to conquer the world. Because of the Fu family's military exploits, they had once become the leader. In fact, the Su family was not bad. Although they did not contribute much, they had brains. The number one military advisor by Taizu's side was from the Su family. However, in the end, the Su family did not get a share of the rewards. Judging from what was left on the paper, the Su family thought that the Fu family was behind it. The military advisor of the Su family, who was the elder brother of the Fu family, was injured in order to save Taizu's eldest son. His health was deteriorating day by day, and the Su family lost the glory that they should have. They thought that the Fu family were not good people and wanted to snatch everything. Therefore, they set up a vicious trap. The Taizu emperor loved to travel incognito. One day, he met a traveling Taoist priest who was a blind man. He accidentally bumped into him and caused problems. The Taoist priest just touched Taizu's hand and gave him a paragraph. The general meaning was that the Li family was the real dragon, but there was a false dragon of the Fu family on the side who was trying to steal the dragon's aura. It was impossible for the false dragon to replace the real dragon, but it would affect the fate of the Qi Yuan. The stronger the false dragon was, the faster the fate of the Qi Yuan would decline. In the end, the Taoist priest made it clear that if the false dragon was not eliminated, the Qi Yuan emperor could be passed down for 6 generations. What kind of person was Taizu? Of course, he wouldn't easily believe such words. Then, he sent people to investigate and found that the Taoist priest was quite powerful. He had been famous for decades and could only be encountered by chance. It was unlikely that someone had set up a trap. In Jingwan's opinion, the Taoist priest's status at that time was similar to that of Master Liaochen now. However, the Taoist priest was real, but the one that Taizu met was fake. However, it was impossible for Taizu to deal with the Fu family because the world was not yet settled and most of the military power was in the hands of the Fu family. If he attacked the Fu family at this time, he would be regarded as a person who had abandoned the bow after the birds were killed. It was very likely that he would be attacked directly. In that case, the loss would outweigh the gain. Therefore, he could only plan slowly. After all, he had 6 generations to live. The setting of the 6th generation, to a certain extent, was also where the Su family's viciousness lay. They would not force the emperor into a corner and quickly get rid of the Fu family. They would slowly erode and weaken the Fu family bit by bit. Generation after generation, they would have to suffer a lot. Cutting their flesh with a blunt knife was too painful. However, the Fu family was unexpectedly stubborn. The emperors of Qi Yuan had a good reputation and there was an emperor in the middle. They were like puppets and did not have the time to deal with the Fu family. Therefore, the grudges between the two families had lasted for a long time. 6 generations of emperors? The emperor is the 5th generation, right? Jingwan found it funny. In the previous generation, the Fu family was still alive. The possibility of your son not being able to ascend the throne was 0. Even if you gave Fu Yunting 300,000 soldiers, would he be able to take away your country? Li Hongyuan sneered. It was more likely that he would skin Fu Yunting alive. I told you that it was made up by the Su family. So, everything is clear now. Your father did this because he wanted to eliminate the threat to his son. Does that mean that he is a good father? Doesn't Wang feel disgusted when he said that? Well, he probably did it for himself. No matter what, she felt a little complicated. Should she say that the Su family was evil? But if the Fu family was really blocking the future of the Su family, it was not wrong for the Su family to do so. However, Jingwan felt that it was not the case. She had a feeling that there was someone behind the scenes who stopped the Su family and broke the Fu family. But it was just a guess. It was impossible to know what the situation was at that time. It was hard to tell who was right and who was wrong. However, if Li Hongyuan insisted on blaming the Su family, then the Su family could only be considered unlucky to have provoked the unreasonable King of Hell. Speaking of which, the King of Hell wasn't completely unreasonable. After all, the person he loved had indeed died because of those messy things, and it was a tragic death. In that case, the people related to it wouldn't have a good ending. Moreover, the King of Hell was petty and liked to hold grudges. Even if it didn't happen in this life, Imperial concubine Su would still want to harm Jingwan. So, let's settle the old and new grudges together. Oh right, Yuan, how did you start the fire in the Su family? It was broad daylight and everyone was awake. It was not easy to start a fire. Moreover, it was impossible to make a pile of firewood and pour oil on it. You just had to do something to the window paper. It was such a simple thing. So, in the heart of the King of Hell, there was nothing difficult in the world. Anything could be solved with a flick of his finger. Is there nothing that you think is more difficult and requires more effort? Yes, I'm going to marry you. https://11/11807/12684348. Chapter 497. So, was she being showered with sweet nothings again? Jingwan pounced on Li Hongyuan and fiercely bit him. This was too much of a foul. Jingwan didn't bite him hard, and Li Hongyuan was usually someone who took this as a form of entertainment, so he naturally let her bite him. However, the King of Hell had always been someone who refused to be taken advantage of. He always wanted to take it back 10 times or 100 times over. Thus, when Jingwan loosened her bite, he directly trapped her in his arms and fiercely kissed her until Jingwan almost couldn't breathe. Only then did he let go. Wan, even if you're excited, you shouldn't casually seduce others. Even if I'm your husband, you should be more reserved. What did he mean by pretending to be obedient after taking advantage of him? This was, and it was the epitome of the epitome. What did he mean by playing the blame game? This was, he was still an expert in his hands. Jingwan panted and calmed her breathing. She pulled this man's face, not wanting to argue with him. Because if she couldn't win the argument, she would be the one who would be miserable in the end. Everything that wasn't too important could become very indecent in the end. However, the Su family's fire was really inexplicable. Fortunately, they only lost some ordinary financial resources. The collapsed buildings were a bit troublesome. If they were to rebuild, the entire Su family would probably have to move. No matter how good the other places were, how could they compare to the meticulously decorated home? In addition, after investigating, they still couldn't find the cause of the fire. After all these things, the Su family's faces couldn't be any darker. However, there were always people who weren't so optimistic. Noble consort Su, who had already decided to rest in peace, began to worry again. She had the Su family investigate again and again to ensure that there really weren't any mistakes. The head of the Su family was also baffled. What were the important things in the Su family, and where were they placed? He knew in his heart that everything was fine. What mistakes could there be? He didn't know what this noble consort Su was thinking all day long. However, because of her identity, he didn't dare to say anything even if she was his younger sister. In fact, there was nothing fatal in the Su family, especially after Su Mingzhang's accident. Some things had been taken care of. The only thing left was probably the ancestors' plot against the Fu family, but that thing had been passed down through several generations. The Fu family definitely did not know about it, and the emperor could not possibly know the truth. Thus, no one would deliberately look for that thing. However, if it was not an internal fire, then it could only be arson. No matter whether the arsonist was from the Su family or outside, there had to be a motive. Now, nothing had been discovered. However, the more unknown it was, the more uneasy it was. Imperial concubine Su was inexplicably flustered. She felt that something terrible would happen after the Su family caught fire. In the end, Imperial concubine Su still asked her brother to burn that thing. In any case, it was useless to keep it today. Emperor VI. There was no need to continue passing it down, and there was no need to follow the ancestors' wishes to see the Fu family destroyed. The emperor would do everything possible. However, if the losses were too great, Imperial concubine Su would also care about the interests involved. After all, she believed that the future Qi Yuan Empire would be her son's. Everyone wanted their own empire to be rich and powerful. Imperial concubine Su thought too much. Her body, which had finally recovered a little, deteriorated once again. No matter who it was, everyone knew that she couldn't go on like this. Imperial concubine Su was also forcefully controlling her emotions. However, the results were minimal. In a short period of time, too many unfavorable things had happened. If a person's emotions were so easily controlled and she could do whatever she wanted, then she was basically beyond the scope of a human being. Prince Rui couldn't leave the prince's residence. When he heard this, he became anxious. In the end, he had no choice but to let his princess enter the palace. Even though he knew that his princess was suppressed most of the time when she faced his mother, he felt aggrieved. It didn't matter usually, but now that she was pregnant, if she was depressed, it might not be good for the baby in her belly. However, he also hoped that this child could make his mother happy. The idea was beautiful, but the reality was cruel. In the beginning, this method did work to some extent, but it wasn't very good, and it didn't last very long. It was obvious that Imperial concubine Su had the idea of confusing the royal bloodline early on. It was enough to show that she didn't value the child as much as others, or even as much as she thought. The reason for this was that Imperial concubine Su habitually said some words to manipulate Princess Lu. She wanted Princess Lu to know that she and Prince Rui were one. If her husband couldn't be well, then no one could be well. What she meant was that she didn't want Princess Lu's maiden family to change sides at the last minute. If they did anything that harmed Prince Rui's interests, no one could get away with it even if they shed all pretense of cordiality. Princess Lu had had enough of Imperial concubine Su. Now that she was pregnant, she still couldn't stop. No one would be in a good mood. For the sake of the child in her belly, she decided not to endure it this time. Therefore, she stood up directly and said, "I think it's better for mother to rest quietly. In this case, I'll take my leave first." Imperial concubine Su, who had always been submissive, actually disobeyed her one day. At that moment, Imperial concubine Su's expression was quite interesting. In her heart, it was perhaps even more difficult to accept than Jingwan's disobedience at the beginning. After all, Jingwan had never obeyed her from the beginning. Princess Lu was inexplicably happy. Sure enough, there were still many things that she couldn't see through. Once she saw through it, or it was better to say that she didn't care about it, nothing could bind her until she couldn't breathe. Imperial concubine Su sneered, "Good, very good. I'm useless now. Even I don't have the patience to listen to what I have to say." Since she had taken the first step, Princess Lu felt that her mother-in-law was just like that. She was also a person, a woman, and a woman who also needed other men's favor to live a comfortable life. The child in her belly was important now. She had her own family to support her. In this case, there was no need to make herself suffer. "Mother, I remember how you treat me all these years. I probably won't forget it for the rest of my life. If it's possible, perhaps I can let your future granddaughter-in-law have a taste of that. But after thinking about it, I feel that it's quite meaningless. Only those who are sick would inflict their own pain on others. I think that I'm still a normal person. Moreover, it's uncertain whether you can have a granddaughter-in-law. After all, who can guarantee that the child will be a boy?" Imperial concubine Su's face turned livid. "Shut up. It must be a boy in your belly." "A boy?" Princess Lu smiled mockingly. "Yes, according to you and the prince, it must be a boy even if it's not, right?" They were willing to do anything for their own rights, but who had ever considered her feelings? It would be fine if she gave birth to a boy, but what if it was a girl? If it was a little better, she wouldn't know where she would end up, but if it was a little worse, she might even die. She was clearly the daughter of a noble family and should enjoy the most honorable life, but because of these people, she was mercilessly deprived. Based on what? Just for more people's riches and honor. What riches and honor? What kind of life did she live after marrying into the prince's mansion? What was the point of such riches and honor? She had already wronged the 2 children before her. Was she going to continue to wrong the one in her belly? There weren't so many schemes. What was wrong with living a good life as a family? "Lady Lu, do you know what you're talking about?" "Mother, of course I know. I've never known it before. I know it better than ever. I didn't understand it before." Imperial concubine Su breathed heavily. She almost couldn't control herself and directly stood up to give Princess Lu 2 hard slaps. "Since you know it, then you should understand that there is no way out for some things. If you retreat, your daughters will die with you. Do you want to lose all 3 of them, or 2 of them? Of course, if it's a boy, then everything will be fine." Princess Lu smiled bitterly. She also knew this, so there were many things that she couldn't do as she wanted. "Mother, do you really think everything will be fine if you give birth to a boy? How did the prince get poisoned? Even if you give birth to a boy, the person behind the scenes can make an issue of it, right?" Daughter-in-law hopes that imperial concubine mother and Prince Wang Yi will be more skillful in the end and get what they want. Daughter-in-law is not doing this for my own glory and splendor. I just want to save the lives of my 2 daughters. Anyway, daughter-in-law does not expect them to have a good future. After all, there are not many princesses in the imperial family who have good days. Especially their father, who has never put them in his eyes. The corners of imperial concubine Su's mouth twitched. For a moment, she really didn't know what to say. "Mother, take good care of them. If there's nothing else, I won't enter the palace before the child is born. At least now there is a piece of meat in my belly as an amulet. Let me enjoy myself for a while. As for after the child is born, who knows what will happen? Maybe I will even lose my life. Therefore, I should enjoy myself as long as I can. Otherwise, when I am about to die, I will recall that I have lived a sullen life for the rest of my life. If I am lucky enough to survive, I will be at your disposal." Imperial concubine Su dragged her heavy body and squatted. Then she turned around and left. Although her movements were slow, they were unusually firm. Whether it was the servants around Imperial concubine Su or the servants around Princess Lu, they were all trembling violently at this moment, because they heard something that they didn't dare to hear. Imperial concubine Su felt dizzy. She rubbed her temples weakly. Call people in, drag them out, and flog them to death. These words were obviously said to the chief palace maid beside her. The palace maid suppressed her fear and said, yes. She wasn't sure whether she would be flogged to death or not. The palace maids and eunuchs were so scared that they collapsed to the ground. However, they subconsciously begged for mercy, hoping that Imperial concubine Su would give them a way out. They promised that they wouldn't tell anyone about it. Otherwise, they could become mute. They just wanted to keep their lives. Imperial concubine Su was very uncomfortable now. How could she have the strength to deal with them? She didn't even want to say a word. Princess Lu moved slowly and was supported by her maid. They hadn't walked far when she heard the noise. Her expression was normal, but she clearly felt the maid's fear. Hold on tight. If I fall, you will really die with me. Watch your mouth. You will be fine before the child is born. Thank you. Thank you, Princess. She breathed a sigh of relief. Her life was saved for the time being. Why are you thanking me? I am the one who put you in this situation. As servants, we all know how you are, Princess. But why can't you bear it for a while? You just want to be happy. There are some things that you shouldn't say. In this way, when the child is in your belly, you can live a carefree life like Princess Jean. It doesn't matter. Princess Lu glanced at her in surprise. I didn't expect that you are so good at talking. You are usually a little dull. I know what you said. But some people just don't know and don't want to know. I have had enough of these days. Moreover, pregnant women have a strange temper. Most of the time, they probably can't control themselves. It doesn't matter if they say it. After Princess Lu left the palace, she didn't go back to Prince Rui's mansion. Instead, she asked someone to go to the farm directly. Because she didn't want to face her husband now. She was afraid that she couldn't help saying something she shouldn't say to him. Therefore, she tried to avoid it as much as possible. Anyway, her husband couldn't leave the mansion now. Prince Rui was practicing calligraphy in Prince Rui's mansion. When he heard that Princess Lu went to the farm and his mother beat several people around him to death, he didn't know the specific reason. He finally calmed down, but suddenly, he became irritable again. Go and take the princess back to the mansion immediately. Prince Rui's eunuch complained incessantly. If the princess wanted to come back, she wouldn't go to the farm. Moreover, the princess was precious now. They didn't dare to be rough. Therefore, before they went out, they were doomed to make a wasted trip. However, they couldn't tell Prince Rui about this. They just had to make a trip and come back to be punished. It would be better if they could be a little late. As expected, Princess Lu sent them away easily. Anyway, her two daughters were also in the farm. It didn't matter. The eunuch could obviously feel the change in Princess Lu's attitude. All this happened after she entered the palace. Then, maybe it was a very wrong decision to let the princess go to the palace this time. People in Prince Rui's mansion, no matter whether they were servants or concubines in the backyard, were in deep trouble. Maybe the two concubines, who were disliked by Prince Rui at the beginning, were living a more comfortable life now. When the eunuch went back to report, he was ready to be destroyed by his master's anger. Therefore, when the teacup hit his head, he didn't even move his head. The blood flowed and covered his eyes. He just reached out to wipe it and didn't have any other reaction. Prince Rui was furious. He probably didn't expect that the woman who had always been obedient to him would disobey him. In fact, his thoughts were similar to noble consort Sue's. Married women should rely on their husbands and live a life of obedience to their mother-in-law. How dare she rebel? It meant that she was tired of living and didn't want to live a comfortable life. Did she really think that she could do whatever she wanted with a piece of meat in her belly? However, Princess Lu still did it. No one could do anything to her. Not long after, Jingwan naturally knew about it. Although she didn't know the details, she knew that Princess Lu must have quarreled with noble consort Su and her son. However, Jingwan didn't have a bad impression of Princess Lu. She didn't have a bad impression of her, let alone a good impression of her. She didn't care about it now. In the future, when it was time to scheme against her, she would scheme against her. She would never say anything about it. However, when Jingwan wanted to ignore it, Princess Lu came to her. Jingwan raised her eyebrows. For the sake of the pregnant woman, she met her. After all, it was really hard for a pregnant woman, especially when there were too many people expecting a boy in her belly. It must be very stressful for a pregnant woman. She didn't worry that something would happen. According to how much Princess Lu valued the child, it was impossible for anything to happen. Moreover, even if something happened in her farm, she wouldn't do anything in the end according to the nature of the King of Hell. Jingwan originally thought that her sister-in-law's situation wouldn't be very good. However, after seeing her, she was much better than expected. She looked very clear-headed and didn't seem to be under heavy pressure. Jingwan was surprised. "Why do you want to come here today?" Jingwan asked the servants to prepare tea and snacks. Of course, the tea was healthy flower tea, which was good for pregnant women. Princess Lu waved away her maidservants and nannies. She directly took a sip and said, "Sixth sister-in-law, the things here are special. Can you give me some later?" Her attitude was so relaxed that it was a little surprising. "Third sister-in-law, you are very precious now. I don't dare to give you the things that you want to eat. Well, I will give you the recipe. You can go back and ask someone to make it. It's not difficult, and it won't take long." "Okay." Princess Lu nodded without hesitation. "Before I came here, I thought that you would be comfortable here." As expected, after entering the farm, my mood became better. "I'm afraid that I will have to disturb you in the future. I'm thick-skinned this time. Please forgive me, sixth sister-in-law." Jingwan really suspected that something had happened to her third sister-in-law. It was as if all the shackles on her body had been removed. She was so relaxed and carefree that she only lived for herself. She thought for a while. It seemed that noble consort Su seemed to be worse. Maybe it was true. If noble consort Su was worse, Jingwan felt that she would be better. Although the enemy of an enemy might not necessarily be a friend, and noble consort Su and noble consort Lu were probably far from enemies, as they disobeyed the same mother-in-law, they could still talk about some unimportant topics calmly. Princess Lu came to Jingwan just to chat. The reason why she came to Jingwan instead of others was that this sixth sister-in-law lived the most comfortable life. Apart from all kinds of grievances, her personality was actually quite likable. Princess Lu envied Jingwan. She used to be, and she still was. However, it was just a kind of feeling in her heart. She would not do anything because of it. Now, perhaps it was more complicated. Because now, when she saw her sixth sister-in-law smiling like a flower and saw that her eyebrows were relaxed and her face was rosy no matter what, she felt better. Princess Lu touched her belly and said with a smile, "The baby will definitely like you in the future, right?" Jingwan smiled and raised her eyebrows. "Third sister-in-law, why do you say that?" "Because it's still in my belly." "Because you're here, it can make his mother feel better." What kind of show was this again? Then, Jingwan laughed. It was just a casual chat. There was no need to think so much. Even if she had a purpose, she could just deal with it as it came. Third sister-in-law, well, I like what you said. I hope that the baby can also please my sixth aunt. Princess Lu touched her belly again and said with a smile, good girl, please your sixth aunt in the future. Your sixth aunt has a lot of treasures. If you please her, you will get a lot of benefits. Jingwan did not want to think too much. However, her third sister-in-law was troublesome. Couldn't they just chat? Princess Lu stayed at Jingwan's place for 2 hours. At first, she just sat and then took Jingwan to walk around with her. Anyway, she lived like this in daily life. Jingwan did not care. It was just that there were a lot of flowers and plants on the farm. If she stayed with some for a long time, she would feel uncomfortable. She could not take it lightly, especially for pregnant women. She told her directly, and Princess Lu did not refuse to listen to her. She just walked around in those places where she could definitely go. She really looked like the most ordinary sisters-in-law. Jingwan could obviously feel that Princess Lu was very relaxed. After sending them off, Jingwan stood there quietly for a while. In the end, she gave up. There was no need to trouble herself. Anyone who had a little bit of doubt would have to go through all the twists and turns to understand. Wouldn't that be exhausting? Princess Lu was really a woman of her words. She came to Jingwan's place to report every few days. She had already said that she would be thick-skinned. What else could she say? It was fine if it was just 1 or 2 times, but if it happened more often, it would take up more of Jingwan's time. The King of Hell expressed his displeasure, but he was a man after all. How could he be so calculative with a pregnant daughter? However, he could not do anything directly. So, he asked someone to find something for Jingwan to do. He wanted her to know what was good for her. Every time she was called away, Jingwan's so-called thing was to see someone, leaving Princess Lu alone. Jingwan did not know whether to laugh or cry. She said that this man was childish, but he did not admit it. Well, she did not say it in front of him. After so many times, Princess Lu also realized it. Especially when it was the right time, her sixth sister-in-law would be happy. How could she not understand? She covered her mouth and laughed, if you are really busy, you don't have to worry about me. Really? She emphasized the word busy. Obviously, she was found out. Jingwan touched her face subconsciously, wondering if someone had left some obvious marks on her body. She scolded him secretly. Then she saw Princess Lu laugh more mockingly. Even though she had been thick-skinned, she could not help but blush. Sixth sister-in-law, you don't have to be embarrassed. Other people, even if they want to be like this, it is an extravagant hope. I, your sister-in-law, am also very envious. Originally, I also know that it is not good to always disturb others, but I also have no place to go. I stay in my own manor and am surrounded by a group of people all day long. There are all kinds of things that they say. It is really annoying. In other places, I am afraid that wherever I go, those people will follow me. They don't dare to follow Prince Jin's place, so I have to be thick-skinned and stay at sixth sister-in-law's place. The manor next to yours is also fine, but there are too many people and I am afraid that there will be an accident. So, no matter how annoying it is, I will probably continue to disturb sixth sister-in-law. However, you really don't have to worry about me. I will sit and walk. When the time is up, I will leave by myself. Third sister-in-law is too serious. It is not a long time. I am also very idle every day. If you feel more comfortable here, it is okay to stay for a while. Jingwan felt that her heart was really starting to harden. Now she was smiling, but in the future, she would still do the same. She would not be soft-hearted to this woman. Princess Lu nodded. As for Princess Lu's words, she did not hide it from the people around her. Among those people, there were not only people sent by Prince Rui, but also by noble consort Su. It was not because they could not see Princess Lu later, but because they had been serving Princess Lu when she was pregnant. Now neither of them could see Princess Lu. If they wanted to get news about her, they could only pass the message through the people around her. If they knew about Princess Lu's recent behavior and what she said, it was hard to imagine what their expressions would be like. In noble consort Su's eyes, Jing Wan was a thorn in her flesh. Some of her opinions about Li Hongyuan had probably been buried very deep in her heart in the past, so deep that she didn't even notice it. Now, it was getting clearer and clearer. When she saw Li Hongyuan again, she might not be able to hide it anymore. After that, Princess Lu came to see Jingwan less often, but it was not like she stopped visiting Jingwan. Jingwan also knew some things gradually. It seemed that third sister-in-law was ready to cut off all means of retreat. But she did not know whether her attitude would affect their future plans. Don't worry. Even if she cuts off all means of retreat, she will not get any result. Let alone other things, she will definitely not be able to get through Li Hongming. Moreover, she still cares about her two daughters. If she can't change anything and gets herself into trouble first, her two daughters will not be able to survive. Now more than anything, she just wants to get by for the time being. Yuan also knows this woman's mind so well. Is it because he has seen countless women? It's not because I've seen countless women, but because I have an unpredictable princess at home. After a long time of hard work, I finally figured out a little bit. Then, I simply learned by analogy. I can see through other women at a glance. Naturally, I still feel helpless when it comes to my princess. I still need to continue working hard. Jingwan was not angry. Yuan is actually talking about yourself, right? Am I like this in Wan's heart? His thoughts are profound and hard to grasp. Yuan is very self-aware. What about you? I think that you can't be more honest in front of Wan. Why are you still unpredictable? Could it be? What? Jingwan answered subconsciously. Li Hongyuan's smile overflowed from the bottom of his eyes. Sure enough, Wan is too stupid. Jingwan's face darkened again. Why couldn't she learn her lesson? She should be vigilant every time this happened, but she still fell for it every time. It happened every time. She was really stupid, wasn't she? Jingwan flung her hand and left. It was too infuriating. Watching this, Nanny Gong could only shake her head helplessly. The princess was always bullied. In addition to the fact that she was young and weak, the most important thing was that she was the one who let the prince out. At the beginning of their marriage, the prince was not so unscrupulous. However, it was purely a matter of one's willingness to be beaten and the other's willingness to be beaten. Others couldn't say anything. However, if outsiders saw this, many women would be willing to be bullied like this every day. It was not until the end of August that Li Hongyuan asked Jingwan to pack up and prepare to go back to the prince's mansion. Counting with her fingers, she had lived in the farm for more than 4 months. Since Jingwan and the others had returned to the capital city, Princess Lu naturally had no place to hang out. But she was more and more peaceful now. People who didn't know her would think that she was eating vegetarian food and praying to Buddha. It was really amazing that a pregnant woman could have such an effect. But this time, after returning to the capital, Jingwan almost knew that there might be a result of what someone was going to do. Of course, it might also be the beginning. Li Hongyuan didn't have much to do during this period of time. Because he was busy with the war in the northwest, Jingwan didn't know much about it. She didn't interrupt or intervene. She didn't even have much time to look at it. Therefore, when he returned to the capital, he found that there were already some rumors circulating in the capital after the 15th of August. In fact, there was no need to think about who it was about. It was about Fu Yunting at the northwest border. As the war became more and more successful, Fu Yunting, as the commander-in-chief, seemed to have an ambition that he shouldn't have. He seemed to have the intention to build up an army and establish himself. No matter how ridiculous these rumors were, in short, they were spread with a nose and eyes. In particular, many people didn't know how to think for themselves. Because their knowledge was very limited, they didn't know how to think. They were more like parrots. They believed what others said and passed more and more ridiculous rumors to more people according to their own guesses. The more ridiculous the rumors were, the more ridiculous they became. In the end, people didn't know what the original rumors were and how they came about. Logically speaking, such things should be suppressed as soon as possible to avoid causing panic. However, Luchingdi thought that it was better to let it go than to block it. The more he tried to stop it, the more people would think that it was true. It was better to let it go. After a long time, nothing happened, and the rumors disappeared. At the same time, he also sent the blackguard to surround Wu Anho's mansion. The reason was to protect the people in Wu Anho's mansion, in case they were attacked because of Su Mingzhang's matter like the Su family before. Why didn't you want to protect the Su family at that time? Some people wanted to roar at Luchingdi. This encirclement, in the eyes of the people, simply confirmed the fact that Fu Yunting wanted to rebel. Otherwise, why would the emperor detain his family? This was clearly to make Fu Yunting hesitate to attack the rat for fear of breaking the vases. No matter how good the officials were, they only felt that it was ridiculous. It was really too ridiculous. However, Luchingdi still did things his own way. He said with certainty that there was no problem with it. Few officials in high positions were stupid. Gradually, more and more people seemed to realize Luchingdi's true attitude towards Fu Yunting. However, the closer they got to the truth, the more they didn't dare to believe it. There was no reason. The Fu family didn't do anything to anger the heavens and the people. But in reality, all the results showed that Luchingdi had ill intentions towards Fu Yunting and the Fu family. Of course, Luchingdi's goal wasn't to spread rumors in the capital. His real goal was to let Fu Yunting know that he had detained everyone in Wu Anho's mansion. He wanted Fu Yunting to think that he was going to harm Wu Anho's mansion, or that he didn't trust him. This would make Fu Yunting so angry that he would do something irrational. If this led to a loss in the war, then it would be justifiable to punish him. If he could really make him rebel, then it was needless to say. Luchingdi's plan was to use the fact that the two places were far away from each other to spread the news. If he did it well, he could even accidentally kill Fu Yunting and the Fu family. Perhaps it was because he felt that this plan was feasible and didn't need to sacrifice a lot of soldiers. Recently, Luchingdi had been in a strange state of excitement. After Li Hongyuan returned to the capital, he went to see him once. In his previous life, he didn't know whether his good father was in such a state before his plan was about to succeed. Because in his previous life, he had been forced to leave the capital at this time. His situation was quite bad, so he couldn't care about anything else. Li Hongyuan turned around and reminded a few people to be careful. He told them that there was something wrong with a certain someone's brain. Even if it was something that was originally planned, they shouldn't act rashly. At this time, whether it was intentional or unintentional, as long as they went against him, then they could provoke his anger. A person who wasn't clear-headed could do anything. Things seemed to have come to a standstill. On Fu Yunting's side, if Li Hongyuan hadn't sent him a letter in advance, it might have really gone according to Luchingdi's plan. Yuan, His Majesty has a good reputation. Even if according to his current plan, the result of accidentally killing is also a result of being muddle-headed. It seems to be a little more cruel and heartless than indiscriminately killing loyal people, but it's still a stain that can't be erased. Could it be that something has forced him into a corner? It's said that the emperor has passed down 6 generations. In His Majesty's mind, it's unknown whether there will be a sixth generation. So, the safest way is to end it in his hands. Li Hongyuan tapped lightly on the armrest. It's not impossible. Then, if it's really so, if Fu Yunting doesn't act according to his plan, will he simply get someone to fabricate a secret letter from the northwest or something, fabricate some plausible evidence, and then deliberately act like he's furious and kill the whole Fu family first? At that time, Fu Yunting will really rebel. Jingwan quivered. Why do I feel that this is the real plan? If Fu Yunting really rebels, he can even erase the accidentally killing label. After all, at that time, no one will care about the order of things. If it's really so, this secret letter won't be made by himself. He needs a way to convince people. So, just the letter isn't enough, he still needs people. These will only be handled by the blackguard. Li Suyen is the best candidate, so there's no need to worry. When this letter appears, we won't know anything. Then what should we do now? I'll think of a way to get his medical records and see if there's something wrong with his body. If there is, then think of a way to increase his lifespan. At least let him feel that he can take things slowly with the Fu family. There's no need to rush and affect his eternal reputation. Isn't the imperial noble consort's altar completed? It's better to choose an auspicious day and start early. In addition, when the people pray for blessings, count in the emperor. After all, he's the husband of the imperial noble consort. Shouldn't he share the imperial noble consort's blessings? But I don't know if it will affect the imperial noble consort. Wan still wants to give him blessings. Whether he has blessings or not, won't it be up to you in the future? As the saying goes, if there's blessings, there's also life to enjoy. Li Hongyuan patted Jingwan's head as if he was petting a puppy. Well, not bad. You didn't read those files for nothing. Don't say that. Jingwan slapped him away. The emperor's medical records were confidential, but it was not difficult for Li Hongyuan to get them. Poisoned. It went deep into his internal organs. There's no medicine to cure him. Jingwan was surprised. Who did this to him? In this situation, even if he was forced to write a posthumous edict, it wouldn't be of much use. No, he just admitted it. It's widely acknowledged that Gongzhou is better than the imperial doctors. How can he not ask Gongzhou? Moreover, Yu Zhongqing didn't send us any news. Is he also being kept in the dark? Why think so much? I'll take Gongzhou there and we'll know. https://www.yanguiwaiwo.com/11/11807/127000542 www.yanguiwaiwo.com. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.